and Beneficient is also a publicly traded company. So while we want to get answers today, if there are times to where we feel that Beneficient is maybe being a little coy, there may be good reason for that. I also do want to say that the allegations are those allegations. Mr. Hebner is due his day in court. He is innocent until proven guilty. So we need to make sure that we keep that in mind as we move forward. But I will address the allegations. I think the word I'm going to use today is disappointing. And I'm going to use the word disappointing. I'm going to use that adjective because earlier in the year I was admonished for using stronger language. I don't want to be admonished again. So while I do have stronger language and stronger thoughts on the allegations, I'm going to use the word disappointing today. I definitely feel that there was some misleading going on to this committee in the past from Mr. Hebner. But I think also today's an opportunity where we can discuss the path forward with Beneficient, as well as the underlying TEFI legislation and the product as a whole, and does it really have a future, and how can we help, if it does have a future, grow that future, or do we need to have discussions on if we need to put guardrails in case this company does become insolvent and we need to wind it down. So I think those are some of the discussions I want to hear today, and just kind of discuss a path forward. So with that, we're going to start. Everybody has the agenda. I will make one change on the agenda. We have the Banking Commissioner up first, Beneficient second, and then an update from Beneficient Heartland Foundation third. I'm actually going to move the Beneficient Heartland Foundation update to second. That way, if we have any further questions for the foundation for Beneficient, we can ask Beneficient when they're up there next. So we will make that small change and just move the Heartland Foundation to second to get that out of the way. So up first, we are going to, actually we have approval of minutes from the November 21st, 2024 and July 31st, 2025 meetings. Mike, have all those been sent out? Is there everybody had a chance to review those? Or are there any corrections? Seeing none.
Mr. Chair, I would move that we approve the minutes as presented.
We got a second? Got a second from Representative Williams. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. We will, yes, ma'am.
May I be recorded as abstaining since I wasn't at those meetings?
Duly noted. Thank you. Staff will record that. Thank you, Senator. Up next, we are going to call up our David Herndon, our Banking Commissioner. Mr. Commissioner, welcome the committee. Good to see you're not sick today.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I am quite healthy, but I am in the midst of a vacation, so pardon me if I'm a little rusty. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, Madam Vice Chairman, and of this joint committee and members of the Committee on Fiduciary Financial Oversight. As you heard, my name is David Herndon, and I am the Kansas Bank Commissioner and lead the agency that is responsible for regulatory oversight of the technology-enabled fiduciary financial industry, commonly referred to as the TEFI industry in Kansas. I appear before you today to update you on the status of the industry that remains unique to Kansas and provide an update on the only TEFI business in Kansas, or in existence, Beneficial Fiduciary Financial, or BFF. So thank you for this opportunity. I'm also joined today by OSBC Deputy Commissioner Tim Kemp and OSBC General Counsel Brock Wigler. So all of us will be available to address and answer questions. I last appeared before this committee on July 31, 2025, where I repeated OSBC's mission and the details of the regulated industries in Kansas under our authority. I told you in July that only one TEFI existed, and that being BFF. That remains the case today. I also told you in July that my office had conducted an examination on BFF on July 23rd, 2025, and an exit meeting took place with BFF's board of directors to review those exam findings. Following the exit meeting, several exchanges have taken place between our respective staff, leading to the final report of examination being prepared and delivered to BFF's board of directors on October 22nd. Although the report of examination itself is a confidential document between OSBC and the BFF pursuant to KSA 91712A, I can disclose that the scope of the examination focused on BFF's compliance with applicable laws and regulations found in Chapter 9 of the Kansas statutes noted, and amendments thereto with specific attention to the TEFI Act that was enacted in 2021 via Senate Sub for House Bill 2074 and can be found in KSA 92301 through 92307. Significant and repeated violations of the Kansas statutes and regulations have been cited. Due to the volume of these violations, OSB has proposed the issuance of a formal corrective action, which is forthcoming and should be delivered today or tomorrow to the BFF Board of Directors. We are proposing the issuance of a formal corrective action, and OSBC will institute a continuous examination cycle for BFF. Dates for future examinations as part of that continuous cycle have not yet been determined. However, discussions between OSBC and BFF to determine an applicable commencement date will be held by the end of this month. I brought up several concerns about BFF continuing as a going concern at this committee's July meeting, derived from publicly available sources. Those concerns not only remain, but have increased. I addressed concerns regarding financial stresses at both BFF and its parent company, Beneficient, specifically late SEC filings by the parent, low stock prices, and the resultant delisting notices from the SEC, claims by former employees over unpaid wages, the circumstances of the founder and CEO's departure from the company, the low number of transactions BFF has been able to close, and the resulting minimal payments in cash that that were paid to the Kansas Economic Development Fund. None of these issues have fully resolved themselves. Some have compounded and others have emerged. Most notable, as you heard, as Mr. Chairman cited, the 5-count indictment in Southern District of New York and the arrest of former CEO and founder of Beneficient, Brad Hepner, on Tuesday of this week. 5 counts were securities fraud, wire fraud, conspiracy to commit wire and securities fraud, false statements to auditors, and falsifications of record. The indictment alleged Mr. Hepner's action cost more than 15,000 investors to lose over $1 billion. I don't know how many, if any, I don't know how many of the investors were Kansans, but I do know of at least one who called me shortly after the TEFI Act was passed in 21, quizzing me on how the Kansas legislature could fall for Mr. Hepner's scheme. That was his word, not mine. Mr. Hepner's Texas resident was also raided Tuesday of this week by the FBI. I'm uncertain if that raid was the result of the indictment or if it was something else. I realize these are allegations, and Mr. Hepner is no longer associated with Beneficient or BFF, except perhaps as a stockholder. But it does reinforce the concerns previously concerned and previously expressed to this committee. Back to our report of examination and notice of prompt corrective action that we've issued to, or will be issuing today or tomorrow, to BFF's board. It's a signal from our office that significant improvement is necessary for BFF to thrive. Items noted that causes concern include lack of corporate oversight and governance by the board, significant and frequent changes in leadership, the inability or unwillingness to comply with Kansas statutes and regulations, the limited number of transactions, a history of operating losses, and ongoing legal challenges. Respecting the confidentiality of the report, I cannot comment further. But other items brought up at the July meeting of this committee included a suggestion of marketing efforts commenced to attract more TEFIs to Kansas and activities in Heston, Kansas, the community that was to receive economic funds for a downtown grocery store. I'm unaware of any marketing efforts being conducted by anyone, but I report to you again that the OSBC has not received any application, nor have we received any inquiry from anyone wishing to obtain a TEFI charter in Kansas. And as far as the grocery store, the BHF Grocery Store LLC forfeited its standing in Kansas for failure to file its annual report with the Secretary of State that was due on July 15th, indicating no future activities toward building a grocery store is underway or anticipated, at least by that entity. Further, there is no clear evidence of any business being conducted by BFF in Heston or any other community in Kansas. So that concludes my testimony, Mr. Chairman, but of course I will stand for questions.
Thank you for that, Mr. Commissioner. Committee, we will go ahead and open them up for questions. Senator Owens, we'll start off.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a handful of questions and certainly happy to defer those to give other people the opportunity. Mr. Herndon, why after 3 years do we not have an initial set of industry-specific regulations for the TEFI industry?
The TEFI Act does not permit me to write those regulations other than those that were adopted shortly after the TEFI Act was adopted.
I believe that there was a specific call for the bank commissioner to work with BFF in drafting those industry-specific regulations. And if I recall, many times they have offered to do so. Is that correct?
Somewhat, as well as our offer to write these. But our efforts have been to bring the TEFI industry, whether it be BFF or anybody else that might follow, into a more regulated environment that includes safety and soundness principles that the TEFI Act does not include. And there's been objections to that.
Certainly, the TEFI Act specifically precludes the typical, camel ratings and things like that. We know that's why we drafted the TEFI Act. So you put a lot of focus on the fact that no other entity has attempted to apply to create a TEFI in Kansas. Why would they if there are no industry-specific standards and the OSBC continues to call for its elimination?
I think the answer is more, why would they? Because they can already conduct every action that the TEFI Act includes without going through the process of obtaining a charter.
They can?
Sure. There's entities, banks, and otherwise that deal in alternative assets as part of their business model and have been for decades.
And those are, so they take, those banks take trusts, they allow alternative assets, and they're still regulated under the exact same standards that every other typical bank is. Because I know I've went to my bank and asked to loan money on alternatives and they don't touch it.
No, typically it's a large bank, much larger than those that are headquartered in Kansas.
Okay, fair enough. So you've also put a little bit of focus on the Heston and calling out that there's no activity by the grocery store and the BFF doesn't appear to do any business there. When was the last time you were in Heston, Mr.
About 18 months ago.
Okay.
We have staff who routinely go to Heston, live in Heston area, and report to me.
And they've stopped in BFF's office where I see cars there on a regular basis doing business?
I can't speak to what actions they've undertaken, but there's no apparent business.
There's 2 storefronts and people there on a daily basis.
Okay.
So I would encourage them to stop by. I would also ask if you have reached out to the Heartland Foundation about the activities going on with the grocery store. Have you done that?
We are not authorized, or that's not an entity that we regulate.
But it's important for you to call it out as apparently not doing anything and forfeiting, implying that it's not doing anything, correct? That was your implication in your testimony.
I simply said that they had forfeited their license for failure to do, for failure to file an annual report.
That's not quite what you put, indicating no future activities towards building a grocery store in Heston.
If they're not doing anything, then they're not.
Yet they are, and we're about to hear from them.
Okay.
And that's my point. My point is your testimony time after time makes assertions that you yourself aren't even taking the time to investigate what is actually happening in Heston.
The grocery store was promised in 2021, and there's not been a shovel full of dirt turned.
You're absolutely correct. And you'll hear exactly why here in just a second, but you would know the answer if you took the time to actually understand what was going on in Heston, Kansas, if it's that important to make it into your testimony.
Okay.
Final question, if I may, and I'm just trying to make a few points here, Mr. Chairman. Are any Kansas taxpayers at risk other than those that have invested in the stock if BFF were to fail?
You've asked that question of me before, and I've answered, I don't know. But the closest, we have done some research and have found 2 instances where states, taxpayers have been at risk. The first one was in New Mexico, and it's Desert State Life Management, a failed trust company. It's not a TEFI. It's a failed trust company that, that has founded in 1987. It was operated, the CEO at the time of an examination in March of 2017, Paul Donisthorpe, was discovered irregularities in their accounting, specifically pertaining to the misappropriation of the disbursement of the funds under his fiduciary duties. And at the conclusion of the examination, the state regulators declared the organization to be financially unsound and immediately moved for receivership. That was in 2017. It's still going on now. The Attorney General's office had to take over the receivership, and I can't speak to how much money they've spent on it, but that was one of the 2. The second one was more recent. It was a suspension order issued by the Colorado State Banking Board in the matter of Etana Custody, Inc., a Colorado non-depository trust company. Again, not a TEFI, but the closest thing that we could find. It's a stipulated order of suspension for failure to maintain a fidelity bond and payment of that bond. The failure to provide a complete list of all accounts and the effective date of the suspension, as of the effective date of the suspension of the operation. That one is too new for me, or I don't have the information, but the Attorney General is once again involved in that action. And presuming that since both New Mexico and Colorado are banking departments are fee-based, then I suspect that they will or have reach out to the Attorney General's office, which would involve the general fund and may at that point involve Kansas taxpayers. So I don't know the answer. We haven't found anything that specifically answers your question, but those 2 instances, one that's been going on for nearly a decade and another one that has just started, were the closest instances we could find.
Okay. Well, and I appreciate that research in attempting to ask that question. Obviously, none of those other states fall under our TEFI Act as written. Right. And we certainly have no idea how the state or the taxpayers were involved in those businesses. I just think it's worth noting that, there is such strong opposition, yet zero evidence to this day, continues to this day, that there's been any harm to the Kansas taxpayer, that Kansas taxpayer has paid any of the bills, has any liability. Quite to the contrary, I believe we heard at the last meeting over $18 million has made it into the Kansas economy as a result. And while the business certainly hasn't gone the way that I think anybody has expected, I continue to reiterate the fact that there is no risk and no harm has come to the Kansas taxpayer for the passing of this legislation and allowing an industry to try to get a foothold. And if that industry ultimately fails, then it fails, and it will fail on its own accord. However, having an Office of State Bank Commissioner that every 6 months is so adamantly opposed to this industry certainly doesn't send a signal of a business that's supported by the state, that anybody would want to do business with. And that continues to be my overarching concern. While I recognize that you're no fan of how this has come about, we've talked about that. You don't like that a charter has been forced upon you to manage. The fact of the matter is this was done by legislative action. And whenever we hear from the leaders of our state constantly, time and time again, that they don't want this industry and that they've called for its repeal, how do you think that that's going to impact their ability to do business? That's a rhetorical question. I won't have you answer that unless you would like to, but you get the point that I'm trying to make. One more thing that I will just add as a comment. Everybody's heard of Samsung, right? Samsung's a perfect example of a company that had a founder that was ultimately indicted on criminal charges, that was forced out of the company, that went on to continue to be an incredibly successful company. And while I certainly do not support the actions of Mr. Hepner that are purported to have occurred, the reality is his actions do not directly represent that of Beneficient, that of its board, or that of its executives. And I think it's important to recognize, and I think that we'll hear today, that arguably without his participation in the company, the optimism is higher than it has ever been for BFF to continue, and we'll hear that from the grocery store as well. Thank you for giving me the time and the leave, Mr. Chairman.
I appreciate that, Senator, and I think that's part of the reason we're here today too, is to find that path forward. And I think, again, we all can speak. I think I can speak for this committee when I say, yeah, the allegations are very disappointing, and still acknowledge that Mr. Hebner is no longer with the company, and the company it's a new day. It's a new day for the company, and we need to figure out, was Beneficient, was the concept of the TEFI built on those lies that Mr. Hebner spread here, or is it an actual model? Is it an actual business model that can succeed? So that's basically what we're here today for, and that's what we're going to get to the bottom. Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I know that Mr. Hepner was federally indicted, but if we had given you guys originally the ability to examine BFF with traditional banking methods, do you think you guys would have been able to unearth, some smoke on Mr. Hepner's dealings at that time?
From what I understand from the indictment, the allegations were activities that were conducted in 2017 through 2019 and involved GWG, which at the time was, or eventually became, the parent or the precursor for Beneficient. So I suspect that since we didn't start with the authority until 2021, the look-back period would not have uncovered anything, but that's pure speculation.
Yeah, and I think that's that timing is important. I think that's another frustrating aspect, especially with me, is he was, allegedly perpetrating this fraud before coming here and selling us that product. So it wasn't he sold us an idea, or he sold a product and it didn't work and he was trying to figure something out. He was allegedly defrauding and then coming and selling the product. So that timing thing is really, really frustrating. Committee, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may be difficult to answer, but I'm asking you, as leading the Office of the State Bank Commissioner, if you see your responsibility as protecting Kansas taxpayers, or more general, protecting Kansas citizens.
Is there a difference?
Not everyone, I guess not everyone who lives here necessarily pays Kansas taxes. It was just, some of the comments were talking about, has there been any harm to the Kansas taxpayer? And I'm just wondering, are we limiting the Office of the Bank Commissioner to protecting Kansas taxpayers, or is there a broader concern? And that's just something I'll ponder. I don't know that I need you.
And Senator, I think that question was more of, is there a liability to the state general fund? When they're asking about the Kansas taxpayer, I think it's more of the state, is it a liability? I think the commissioner is just like myself, just like everybody on this committee. Well, yeah, there are taxpayers, but there are also Kansas that may not be paying taxes, but that I represent them as well. You know, I don't just represent taxpayers of Kansas. I represent every constituent of mine, regardless if they pay taxes or not, or if they voted for me or not. And I believe it's the same with the Office of Banking Commissioner, that his charter as well is to protect every single Kansan and not just taxpayers. But I think Senator Owens was just on the aspect of, is this going to cost us taxpayer money to do this? Has there been any threat to the state general fund or anything? I think that was pretty much the gist of that.
Well, and to further answer your question, the mission, our OSBC's mission, is to ensure the integrity of the regulated industries that we regulate, at the same time protect and educate consumers that use those, that are customers of those entities. So does that answer your question?
That does. Thank you.
Senator Fack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'd like to know, has the examination fees been paid for by BFF? Are we current on that?
Yes, sir.
Do we have any extra money holding to cover these costs? At one time, it seemed like we did.
The balance as of yesterday, and having received the $1 million assessment in July of this year, the balance in the TEFI fund is just short of $1.1 million. $750,000 of the $1 million that was received in July is retained by us. $250,000 is passed to the Department of Commerce. I do not know what the Commerce Department balance is for their role, but they receive cash from us, and some of the transactions that they have received historically have been paid in non-cash items.
Could you explain the examination process? What do we focus on? I know in banking, you talked about camel rating. This is not a typical bank. Do we have any kind of rating system that we've set up to say, here's the priorities that we look at in this kind of product?
As I mentioned in my testimony, we test for compliance of the Kansas statutes, banking and trust statutes that the TEFI Act provides for, as well as the accounting and compliance with those sorts of things that I've provided testimony on before.
Wanted to check too. Can you explain to me what an alternative asset is?
What? I'm sorry.
Alternative asset is, and then what's the difference between a BFF alternative asset and what we have as a CAPER's own alternative asset?
No, sir, I cannot. I do not follow CAPER's alternative assets, so I cannot compare or speak on behalf of CAPER's. BFF has identified alternative assets as illiquid assets with a wide range of what they are. But they are items that cannot easily be or quickly be converted to cash, thus making them illiquid.
So is the customer aware that there's more risk to this, and the higher the rate, the higher the risk?
Are you talking about BFF's customer? Yeah. Presumably.
Yeah, I think, that's discussed up front with what goes on. I mean, it was my understanding that we was after high net worth people that was willing to take the risk to take and buy those kind of products at a reasonable, at a great price that would eventually turn around. So I just wonder if you could comment on that.
Previous testimony has indicated that the customers are people who wish to dispose of an illiquid asset. Whether the circumstances around that are critical, personal, the nature of the asset, the underlying value of the asset, presumably vary from transaction to transaction. I can't speak because there haven't been enough transactions to say they only deal in this alternative asset or that alternative asset, but they are generally and consistently referred to as illiquid.
So what's the current status of the delisting notice from SEC?
I would defer that to BFF or Beneficent.
What has their stock price done since our last meeting?
It's moved up and down, but it's typically been, other than for a few days, under $1. It was 30 cents to 50 cents, and like I said a few times, it's gone up over $1. There have been some recent announcements of intentions to do a reverse stock split that would increase the stock price. I don't know the status on that. It would take an action of the shareholders, as I understand it, whether or not they can get a quorum, and whether or not that quorum would approve remains to be seen.
So I looked at 9:15 this morning and stock price is 60. So that's 10% change since the last time. And the SEC, as far as I know, has allowed us to go on delisting and tell what's going on. I've been, the company's been trying to do the right thing. I think the board of directors made the right decisions on what they've done. And I think we need to be very careful because we go back to the basic concept of what we were trying to do about being open for business and community. And this is a new product, and it is something that's got risk to it. But it's one of those things that it's kind of our responsibilities to maybe go back and look at some of the statutes and say, does it pertain to this? Somewhere I read in there about a daily financial statement. How do you take an unlisted alternative asset that's still liquid and decide what the value of it is every day? Those are things that I don't have the answer to. But I would question, we don't spend a lot of time daily on things of that nature, and if the statute requires that, we need to go back and look at some of these statutes and say, what can we get to give the students in the right person?
Mr. Commissioner, do you have any follow-up to that?
Banks produce daily financial statements. Every bank produces a daily financial statement. They are book balances and not necessarily market balances. For example, a long-term loan may have a 100% par value, but a market value would be discounted if you were to sell that based on the market, on what the terms and conditions of that. Same is true with a bank's investment portfolio. We are just now coming out of a pretty stressful time where banks had unrealized losses in their investment portfolio because of interest rates. But those were unrealized, yet banks were required under GAAP accounting principles to mark those to market based on if they purchased or made the investment with the intent to hold it to maturity, or if they had purchased it with the intent to make it available for sale. We had a big struggle in the banking industry because it wiped out a lot of the value of those investments. Over the period of time, those investments have recovered because they've reached maturity and paid off at par in full, or the interest rate movement has lessened the unrealized loss in that. I'm suggesting that because we cannot do a safety and soundness examination on the financial condition of BFF or any other TEFI, that is unavailable information to us.
So does the large banks actually do a daily statement on alternative assets, evaluation of them?
I can't speak to the internal functions or what a large bank or anybody else does.
Yeah. And I can hear what you're saying, Mr. Commissioner, on the value changing every day on a bond. But I'm saying the actual asset, a different animal here. I don't know how you decide what the value of my house is today if rates go up or go down or the stock market's off 1,000 points. You know, trying to decide what that value is on a daily basis. I just don't see how the system can do that. So
the people that determine the value of your house don't do it on a daily basis either. They do it on an annual basis with their assessment, so they can't. But that is that an alternative asset, an illiquid asset? Probably so. It has a value that you believe it's worth that may or may not be what I believe it's worth.
thank you.
Okay, Senator Chair Dietrich and then Representative Osmond.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clear up a statement, Senator Fagg. In Capers, I know you were uncomfortable answering this. They don't deal with alternative assets. It's alternative investments. So there's a 15% cap on that. There's lots of guardrails put in place. 25, because Senate Bill 23 just changed that. So there is private equity and there's infrastructure. Just as a refresher, because we had media in the room, I just wanted to make sure we noted that Capers does not deal with alternative assets, it's alternative investments. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Representative Osmond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. So thank you very much, Commissioner, for your testimony. Obviously, as an interim committee, we have no ability to affect legislation, but we do have the ability to either make recommendations or prepare for the general session. So my question is, do you have, at this point, recommendations to either modifications to the TEFI Act or to the banking standards, or do you have proposed legislation that you would be willing to introduce to financial institutions when the general session comes up?
We do not have any proposed legislation. I've testified earlier in previous meetings that the legislature should look at potential revisions. I've gone so far as to say that the industry could operate without regulatory oversight from our office and just survive and thrive or suffer and fail through the market like any other business that is not regulated, whether it be somebody that is in the buying and selling of any type of goods to a farm operation or that sort of thing.
Thank you. So as I understand it, then your recommendation would be to remove TEFI from your oversight and control in its entirety?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Committee, any further questions? Seeing none, Commissioner, I do have a few. We will start off, and nothing that I'm going to ask is an indication on the future success or failures of Beneficient, but just for the knowledge of this committee as we go into session. We'll start off on the corrective action plan. Can you walk us through those steps of how, the whole process of that?
When we conduct an examination and find deficiencies or violations, the least intense or the least action that we take is a board resolution where we present our findings to the board and ask them to recognize that and to address the prompt corrective actions.
That in this case would be Beneficient's board.
Correct. Okay. No, BFF's board.
BFF, I apologize, BFF's board.
That is the first step. The second step is a memorandum of understanding if those items that were addressed in the board resolution remain unresolved. Those are confidential documents between OSBC and the subject, in this case, BFF. If the next step in the severity, if there's no actions taken on the board resolution or the memorandum of understanding, would be it becomes a public document, and it's the document that I referred to that we will deliver later today that is a consent order that's negotiated. We will present it also to the BFF Board of Directors, and there will be some negotiation because it's a consent of both parties. If we're unable to reach the agreement on that, then we have the authority to issue a cease and desist order that addresses those. Those final two, the consent order and the cease and desist order, are public documents.
So on the consent order, it's basically the start of the negotiations. It isn't in a final agreement with you and BFF's board on what you guys have agreed to, and you're both signing off on it. It's basically the start of the negotiation?
The start of the negotiation was the board resolution.
Okay.
It said, here are our findings. We'd like for you to recognize and address these findings and cure the deficiencies or the violations or that sort of thing. The second one would be also the non-public document, the memorandum of understanding. And then if those continue to be unresolved or outstanding, then it becomes the consent order. And if that can't be negotiated, it becomes a cease and desist order. So I would say that the start of the negotiations begin with the board resolutions, because more times than not, those items continue all the way through the process.
So would, on the consent order, would BFF in this case, have any input in the contents of the consent order?
No, it's our consent order that's presented to BFF's board of directors. They can object, and they can presumably refuse, knowing that the cease and desist order is the last piece. And I guess the final piece would be revocation of the charter.
Okay. And so in that case, you send the consent order out. What is a typical time frame to go from the consent order to a cease and desist? Is it days?
Measured in days.
Within days? Okay. Thank you for those answers. Kind of on a different front, you mentioned when you and Senator Owens were having a conversation about the other states and the trust companies and the receivership. In a world where beneficent does become insolvent, is there a risk of the state of Kansas accepting receivership?
I'm not positive. I can only speculate. It depends, I think, on the type of wind down that they took. If they chose to take a bankruptcy, it would depend on the nature of which chapter of bankruptcy they took, and they'd be under the guidance of the bankruptcy court. Bankruptcy court would appoint a trustee, presumably. If no trustee were able, then there is presumably a chance that they would refer to my office to be the trustee. That would be a huge challenge because we don't have the staff, and what staff we do have does not have bankruptcy expertise. If they chose a voluntary wind down, then they could probably do that outside of any sort of bankruptcy oversight, unless the creditors forced an involuntary bankruptcy on them. So I'm speculating on if they should cease to do business and under what guidance or authority they would make that happen.
Does your office have the power to reject accepting receivership?
I believe so. I'm not an attorney, but I believe so.
In a case where, we'll just say you're, for some reason, forced to accept receivership, you mentioned you don't have the staff currently. I know we've talked earlier, mentioned a fund, 1.1 million, I think is what was referred to in that fund. The last committee hearing, we kind of had some conversations on maybe we're overfunding that. Could we use some of that money to do marketing or something like that? Could we change that formula a little bit? What kind of financial impact in a world where you are forced to accept receivership could we expect from this? Would it be wise to keep some of that money under your umbrella just in case you have to accept receivership?
And that's what we're doing now. Not only for receivership, but for the introduction of a subsequent TEFI or that sort of thing. The funds are separate. We have 3 funds, one for banks, one for trust companies, one for TEFI. And then, of course, on the non-depository side, it has its fund. All of those are fee-based. If we had to come up with additional money, we would look to the people that, or the banks and the trust companies that are paying those fees, and they would increase accordingly.
So would it be just TEFIs, or would it be all banks in Kansas that fee would increase?
If there's no TEFI to pay the assessment and we were charged with doing it, we'd have to find the money someplace. So it would probably first go, and I'm totally speculating here now, probably first go to the remaining payers through an increase in their assessments. If those were not sufficient, then we'd have to look at other sources.
Okay. And just for the knowledge of this committee, I know we talked about that fund and the amount in there. Something to be wise of too is we get in a little bit of trouble if we try to sweep funds from that fund. There was a court case some years ago, so hands off on the sweeping. So would you, Mr. Commissioner, would you think it's in the best interest of the legislature in the state of Kansas if we pass legislation directing you to reject receivership if it ever came to that?
It's a power and authority that we do not have now. It rests with the legislature. That would be the legislature's decision, of course. But if there is a failure, then, or a near failure or continued non-compliance, then action should be taken. And if the legislature directed us to revoke a charter, then we would revoke the charter.
Well, not necessarily on the revoking the charter front, but also, again, the receivership piece. You know, you brought up the concern, I believe it was New Mexico that you referenced, and I believe it's 7 years they're still unwinding that trust company through their OSBC office. So passing legislation to just declare that if a TEFI were to fail, the state of Kansas would not accept receivership as a way to protect additional, I guess, well, taxpayers, but you having to search for additional fees and staff to help with the unwinding process.
I think the best way to do that would be a proactive step to remove the TEFI Act and make any TEFI that does business non-financially regulated, register itself with the Secretary of State, do business, survive or fail through the business itself, and that would take Kansans other than any other Kansans that might invest in it out of the risk.
Committee, do we have any further? Senator Fack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On a letter that you sent to the CEO, on paragraph 3, it says, even if I were provided with the authority to create new regulations, my position remains that additional regulations are not necessary. My question to you is, who has the authority to create new regulations in?
Legislature.
Okay.
Satisfactory answer? There we go. Committee, do we have any further questions for the commissioner? Seeing none. Thank you so much, Commissioner, for being here today. I'm sorry we had to interrupt your vacation.
Thank you, sir.
All righty. Like I said, we're going to switch up the agenda a little bit. We're going to get an update from the Beneficent Heartland Foundation. You guys remember in the last committee meeting I had requested we get somebody up here to talk about the foundation. Representative King was very helpful in that front. He's obviously from Heston, so he's been able to put this together. So I'm going to kick it over to Representative King real quick.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Ms. Govert, for coming and being a part of this. I'm a native Heston, Denise, Ms. Govert, and I grew up together. She's a small business owner, has a Main Street business, who recently moved into a new location and had a substantial increase in her volume of sales. She's also a former school teacher who taught small business and took the Heston High School kids to area businesses to help teach them small business practices and experiences. And also we have a small business within the high school where they're learning financial planning, ordering, sales tax receipts, and all of those nice things. So I just wanted to put a little plug in there for Ms. Govert. She was just very recently named chair of the board of the foundation, but she has been a member of the board for since the inception, those 4 or 5 years ago. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yep, and Ms. Govert, thank you for being here today. You sound quite busy, so I don't know where you find the time.
Thank you for allowing me. Anxiously awaiting an update because it appears as though that we are not doing anything with building a grocery store in Heston. However, that's quite contrary to that. I have a unique perspective on what the grocery store and what the grocery store should be and what Main Street needs. Like Representative King said, for 20 years I took my students to Main Street and we studied the vacant buildings and we looked at what Heston needed as far as businesses went. We contacted property owners, we checked out what the lease rate was or what the purchase price would be, and then my students were to make recommendations based on what they thought Heston needed and what the feasibility would be of those businesses. And so we would study Main Street. So this project and bringing a grocery store to Heston is not something that's new to me. The concept of the grocery store is, however, we have studied Main Street for a long time. I grew up in Heston. I'm a longtime resident. I left for college and moved around the country for 14 years with my husband's job. And we chose to move back to Heston to raise our family and have been now back a little over 22 years back in Heston. I would love to see Heston have the kind of Main Street that we had when I was growing up. It was vibrant. You couldn't find a place to park. There were all kinds of businesses. Downtown, we had a restaurant. We had a travel agency, which dates me because my students didn't really know why there was a need for a travel agency. They thought you could just get on the internet and plan a trip. But anyhow, so I really would love to see the revitalization of the Main Street itself. As you're aware, the committee is aware, the foundation has been actively working to bring a grocery store to Heston and specifically to Main Street. I feel very strongly that it needs to be in the Main Street corridor because we need the foot traffic that the store would bring to help our businesses, the other businesses that are downtown, to succeed. If any of you have ever been in as part of a small town or rural grocery store development, you know that it takes time. Nothing happens fast in bringing businesses to town. We are particularly conscientious of bringing a sustainable grocery store to Hesston, not something that we would bring in that would require additional assistance or that would just come in, be available for several years and then fail and close down. To help this process along, the board has looked at several ways that we need to simplify and streamline this whole project. One of the areas that we needed to address was the structure and the governance of the board. We have our foundation bylaws that have been rewritten so that it gives more local control and authority to the leaders in Hesston that are serving on the board, and that we have a community-driven board now as opposed to a board that has been more influenced by the positions that Beneficient held. There are now only 2 positions that Beneficient holds. One would be the local BFF resident, and the other one would be then a Beneficient representative. The rest of the positions or on the board are being held by local community leaders. So we've voted and we've made those changes, and this has already created a positive outlook for the board. It's already feeling more like a community effort, and having community input from each one of the leaders has been very important to people that we have spoken to. As part of our restructuring, we've also reslated the board to include 2 at-large members. Currently, as you have seen in the testimony that I sent you, our board is made up of the mayor, city administrator, Harvey County EDC director, the chamber director, educational representatives through Hesston College and through the superintendent of schools, a Blue STEM representative, and then local retail and business owners. But we'd also like to add 2 members at large from the community that would be willing to serve on the foundation board to help guide and direct our progress as we move forward. All of these people are providing input from their points of view to help create a community-driven project, which is very important. As for the grocery store itself, the project itself, the building committee has met weekly for over 3 years. I can count on one hand the number of times that we have missed our Wednesday morning meeting. I know that seems futile, but it has been important for us to have continuity in this project and to continue to push it forward. The things that we have accomplished in that time, we have secured real estate. We've done research with AWG trying to figure out what kind of grocer and who could bring a grocery store to town that would be successful. Moved and upgraded several businesses to new facilities. We preserved an anchor store on Main Street that's important to the downtown and the city. We've also worked with architects and construction professionals to help design projects. And most importantly, we have secured an agreement with a high-quality grocer in White's Food Liner. The owners are still in agreement and working with us to bring a store to town. After we secured their agreement, then we started to develop a grocery store that would meet their needs, meeting the minimum square footage requirements for them to be successful. But with the change in leadership at Beneficient, we've taken a step back as a board to evaluate our initial plan. What we're trying to do now is to look at all the options to reduce the required capital needed to build the grocery store, to make it more in line with what Hesston needs and to have a sustainable store. So in essence, we have looked at the shape of the store, the location of the store. We're exploring all the possibilities for where it could be located to build and trying to determine if a viable grocery store could be built on property that the foundation already owns, or if we need to acquire different property with the preference of not relocating any additional businesses. The shape of the store has been very important because that will also help us reduce the cost, the overall cost of the business, of the building. Simply put, we need a sustainable grocery store. While we're proud of our progress as far as the committee goes, we also know that there's a desire for visible activity. The relocated businesses have been a great start, and they have been successful, mine being one of them. Without the relocation, our business would have just, we would not have had the ability to grow like we have. People stop in now because they're curious about the building, and then which has brought additional customers to town, into the store, which has been great. But that excitement needs to continue, and we need to be moving forward at a faster pace, trying to get something put into place and get a shovel turned so that we can get the grocery store to fruition. From a funding perspective, we are continue as a foundation board to evaluate our assets and to see what assets can be sold, or the property that we already own that can be sold, in order to provide an influx of cash to the project as well. Our current cash position right now at BHF is just over $838,000 that is available to us. And we're expecting another distribution coming down of approximately $650,000 in the next, within the next week, I believe. And from what I understand, right now our beneficial interest is valued at just under $12 million. This has been a challenge, and especially within the last several months. We've got a lot to look through, to work through, but it's a vital initiative, and it needs to be a community initiative, and I think we're on the direction of having community focus. We're going to leverage the assets that we have and those that we hope to continue gaining through this TEFI in the future, through the TEFI legislation. And I wanted to thank you from the board for your continued support.
Thank you so much for being here today and testifying. Will you stand for a few questions?
Absolutely.
Representative Hsu, then Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, thank you so much for being here. Can you kind of elucidate, I guess, a little bit more on why you guys needed to change plans based on the CEO resigning?
Yes, I can. If you have seen any of the images that have been put out regarding the structure and the layout of the store, the initial plan was on the east side of our Main Street location and required the relocation of an additional business. 2 businesses had been relocated. We were going to build a new credit union, move the existing credit union over, and then that square footage where their existing building in would be part of that store. In looking at Main Street itself and the 100 block of North Main, which is basically our business corridor, we are feeling like we need to look at alternative locations that would provide us if I just tell you a box, but a square or a more consistent shape of a grocery store that isn't consistent with White's stores right now. It would be easier for them to have a layout that is consistent with their other stores. So the reason that we've had to reevaluate that is that type of store or that shape cannot be built on the property that we had planned to build it on because of the existence of utilities that would need to be moved and let's see, basically the utilities.
Sure, but in your testimony, you tied it to the CEO resigning, so right. I'm just...
Okay, so let me address that. The original, Mr. Hepner, originally when he was designing and working with us on the project, had some very grand plans. And those plans, I don't think the board feels like would be appropriate for what the grocery store needs for a sustainable future.
You guys got rid of the stupid underground parking.
Thank you, yes, and no tunnel.
I call like I see it, guys. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and maybe along those same lines, Denise was a teacher to my children. I mean, she's a wonderful community leader and an advocate, and I'm really grateful for the work she's done here. But to your point, they were quite ostentatious plans, but when Mr. Hepner was chair of that board, I was on that board for a little over a year. I resigned my position on that board because I felt that it could be not only a conflict, but I also saw that for that foundation to actually get a grocery store is going to be exactly what he wanted or nothing. And so with him no longer being part of that or having that influence, it puts it back in the hands of our local community leaders who know truly what is best for our community. And I'm really, really excited and thrilled about that. I'm excited that Denise, or as my kids would refer to her as Miss Gove, is leading that charge, and I'm very, very thankful for that. And I really appreciate it. One thing I wanted to ask you, though, Denise, is it was mentioned that the BHF grocery store annual report hadn't been filed. Can you speak to that being corrected?
Yes, correct. Thank you for bringing that up. So we, as the foundation board, contract with Swindle, Jansen, Hawk & Lloyd as our accountants and auditors. And so I checked with Greg Woodyard, who is our financial director, and he has contacted our accountant to find out why that annual report was not filed. It is not the foundation filing. It would be for the BHF grocery store. And as soon as that gets filed, that can be corrected. And so we're awaiting a response.
Thank you for that answer. Committee, any for Senator Francisco?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And thank you for being here. I was involved in a grocery store that was our community co-op, and I know about the shape.
Yes.
Because we tried to fit into a bowling alley. But tell me what you mean by sustainable and what you think, because the future is always changing.
Correct.
You know, this month, SNAP benefits are going to be a big part of, are you going to be able to keep your business? So when you say we want to be sustainable, what are those things that you're looking for?
There are several things that have been important to us. Number one, if a store comes to town, do we have the ability, or do the local residents have the ability to go and do their grocery shopping at the store without having to go to an additional grocery store? Originally, some of the suggestions had been that we just put up a Dollar General, because you can go get your items that you need and get your basics at the Dollar General, but then you still have to go to an additional grocery store for produce and meat and the additional items. And so as part of the investigation, White's Food Liner has a location in Lindsborg, and I went to Lindsborg and Lyons to see their stores to do research. I took my grocery list, went to the Lindsborg store, and I was able to do all of my shopping there. So the thing that we think that is important as far as sustainability is that, number one, White's has multiple locations throughout the state. They have the buying power that will be able to bring groceries at a cost that is not going to be exorbitant, to hopefully not cause residents to have to go to an additional grocery store. So that's important for sustainability. Also, to be able to bring those things to town so that people can shop there, and that they don't need supplemental income or any kind of other assistance from the foundation. We want them to be able to be self-supporting.
Thank you for that.
Chair Dietrich.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for being here. I do know White's in Lindsborg. My brother lives there, so it's a great store.
Yeah.
So with the cash assets that you have,
yes,
how much more do you need to be able to at least turn?
So that's a very good question, and that is something that we have been working on, because originally, with the original plan, the cost estimate was into close to 20 million. And that was going to be very long. It was going to be a long process with the rate at which distributions had been happening. We're encouraged with the increase in distributions that we have seen in the last several months. We feel like that our cash position is going to continue to increase. We have properties that we are going to sell. But as far as the overall estimate, I would like to see it come in at less than 10 million, but I don't fully understand or know what total square footage is going to be required. I know that it's going to be a larger store in order to be sustainable, but as far as how much more we're going to need, I need to research, and we're still looking at that.
I ask one follow-up? So if this were a perfect world, when would you want to be able to start actually building and stocking? What would your it may be a little fast.
Maybe a little fast. Actually, in reality, I feel like if we could get a property obtained and that property does not require major demolition or major utility work, I'd love to see it early in 2027. Perfect. I don't know that that's feasible, and maybe I'm pushing it, but that's what I would love to see.
Thank you.
Denise, you kind of referenced, kind of looking at your balance sheet. You have the foundation assets that can be liquidated. How much real estate do you guys have right now?
I think we are, there are trusts holding, sorry, I'm trying to add in my head.
You're fine. You can just ballpark it. Either.
I think we're probably in the around $1 million.
Okay. And of all the real estate you own, none of them are a winner for a grocery store?
No.
Okay.
No, the original purchase of the properties that we are holding right now were to help with our ultimate goal of development of an economic zone on Main Street or within Main Street. Some of them were purchased to, they seem outside of the zone, but they were going to provide an economic asset, basically, that we could help develop in the long term.
Before your guys' board restructuring, was Mr. Hebner a part of the board?
Yes.
And how many seats did he control on that board?
He had his, and then Aurelia Hepner had a seat, and then we had the 2 additional seats from Beneficient itself.
And that is his wife?
Yes,
Okay,
yes.
thank you. And since the restructuring of the board and the restructuring of the changes at Beneficient, what is that relationship like with them? Have they still been helpful to you guys in your goal?
Very.
Okay.
Very helpful, yes. I think that, I feel like we have continued to have a positive relationship. I don't feel like at any time that the foundation has been kept in the dark. I don't feel like, I mean, we're as surprised as everybody else as things that have been happening lately, but as far as direction, I feel like we have been updated continually and have a positive relationship.
Thank you for that. Committee, do we have any further questions? Seeing none? Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All righty, committee, let's take a 12-minute restroom break. 12-minute, well, we can come back at 11. 12 minutes. I should have said 8, and then the senators would have got back here in 12. But we'll take a 12 minutes, and we'll stand at recess. 11:03, I will note for the record that a House member is missing, but all the senators are present. Great job. We're going to go ahead and call up representatives from Beneficient now. I do have an order. Mr. Silk, it looks like you're up first. Welcome to committee, sir. Are you still interim? Have we ripped that off? Are you?
Yes, I continue to be interim.
Okay.
And first, I just want to thank you for the opportunity to come here and apologize again for prior time. I was 10 days on and was remote, but committed to coming here. And it's this is a beautiful building, so it's a treat coming here. You guys are fortunate to be here. James Silk, I'm interim CEO at Beneficient. And deference to the commissioner, I know there's, I want to make sure to clarify, I'm at Beneficient, not at BFF. I'm not an officer chairman, but BFF is our primary operating subsidiary. It is the #1 thing that we are focused on at Beneficient. So obviously, our #1 goal is ensuring that BFF meets its obligation and fulfills its mission. We are, I think it's fair to say that we have in the past, we have overpromised and underdelivered. I'll be perfectly frank with that, but we have delivered. And Derek will come up behind and talk a little bit about, you know, we've talked about some of those things, but, you know, we've always met our obligations that we've needed to meet. We've, to date, I think, paid a little over $4 million to the OSBC and the Department of Commerce. I think $3 million of that went to OSBC, $1 million went to Department of Commerce. I think in terms of cash flows to the foundation, it's been north of $9 million have gone to the foundation. So my #1 priority is, again, making sure that BFF continues to meet its obligations. What I'd like to do today is provide, you know, sort of where we were, what's happened the last 3 months. We'll answer some of the questions I think that have come up previously, and then talk a little about where we want to go, and being respectful of the time, try to go through those, you know, in sort of some level of pace. When I was here on July 31st, I was 10 days in. It was surely a month after Mr. Heppner had been removed from Beneficient, or had resigned. Refresh the committee's recollection. Mr. Heppner had resigned on June 19th. Following his decision, the company had initiated a internal investigation upon determining some facts. Immediately requested a meeting with Mr. Heppner. He declined to meet sit for the meeting, and instead resigned. That request was made, as I mentioned, after the company had identified credible evidence regarding Mr. Heppner's conduct. And I will say, and we'll circle back to this because obviously the elephant in the room is the indictment itself, consistent with the information that's set out in the indictment. And I will say, and I will use the chairman's words, disappointing, to say the least. Obviously professionally, and I will be upfront, me personally, he was a friend. So I will use the word disappointing, and I will share the chairman's view as well. There are much stronger words that I could be using here, but we'll use the word disappointing. Following that, before I joined, at the company's direction, the audit committee engaged in an internal investigation regarding the circumstances around Mr. Heppner. And it was referenced earlier behind the SEC filings. And we were delayed on our SEC filings. We were delayed by 3 months. That is a very long time to be delayed on your SEC filings. We delayed on those filings because the company was going through a very robust internal investigation led by outside auditors under the auspices of the audit committee. Was it a required act? No, it was not required to do an internal investigation. Was it the right thing to do? 100% it was the right thing to do. Did it delay our filings? Yes. It is easy to do the right thing when there's no cost to doing the right thing. It is much harder to do the right thing when there's a cost to doing the right thing. That internal investigation, at the level we did it, was the right thing to do. Did the company suffer? Absolutely. 3 months, delayed filings, out of market. If you ask myself, I was not there to make that decision. I've obviously fully supported it. But if you ask myself, Derek, any member of management, and every single member of the board, if we do it again, absolutely. And what that internal investigation determined was consistent with what the initial findings were, consistent with what's set out in the indictment. But again, that internal review led to the delay in the filings. We do it again every single time because that's the right thing to do. And we are now current on our SEC filings. And this is not relevant to the folks in the room, but I do want to say our accounting team and the employees have been remarkable to put a 10K, 10Q, and in 2 weeks, sorry, 1 week, the next 10Q out in a month and a half is a remarkable achievement. One of the many things why I came back is because of these employees. I just wanted to say that. That non-compliance with the SEC filings was a key contributor to the NASDAQ delisting notice. That NASDAQ delisting, that has been satisfied by the SEC filing. Separately, we also had a market cap because of the stock price. Market cap was below the minimum. That was addressed by myself, more importantly, Tom Hicks, converting preferred stock in amount. In Mr. Hicks' case, it was just under $50 million of his preferred was converted from preferred to common, helped the company meet its NASDAQ requirements. Importantly, that stock's locked up for 3 years. It doesn't affect our trading. And both myself and Mr. Hicks have agreed to, in 3 years, if the stock price has appreciated, and it has appreciated, we will forego any of that appreciation and contribute that back to the company for the benefit of the shareholders. So if anyone is asking, does the company believe where we can go? Well, I believe, I know the management believes, and certainly Mr. Hicks believes. And the last thing that was raised as well on the NASDAQ compliance, the stock price, if it continues to trade below $1, we will have a reverse stock split. We filed a proxy. We should be following definitive within the next 24, 48 hours. And we will, my question was asked about, well, we do have quorum. Well, of course we have quorum because both myself and Mr. Hicks have the necessary stock to both have a quorum and pass the necessary proxy that's met. So from the NASDAQ delisting standpoint, we've addressed those. We are also very focused, as the commissioner has highlighted, on cash flows and ensuring the cash flow is getting to the right place. So one of the penalties of being out of market is that you are limited in your ability to raise cash when you're not current on your SEC filings. So we have engaged in asset sales to the tune of north of over $20 million, bringing operating capital, so just to make sure we have the right capital to function, to move forward. And I would just, as an aside, highlight that of that north of $800,000, the foundation participated that. So in terms of cash flows and where those illiquid assets become cash, the foundation realized north of $800,000 of that. And if you're wondering about the impact on the indictment, I believe it was on November 4th, so 3 days ago, 2 days ago, the day of the indictment, $409,000 flowed to the foundation from these sales. So if the question is asked about, well, do these assets ever monetize, things like that, I would say close to $1 million has been monetized over the last, between October and November, for the benefit of the foundation. And last, again, thing in terms of where we are, we have engaged in expense reduction, as all companies should do, prudent. I would say is on January 1st, we had, I would say, legitimate third-party debt of $27 million. That's been paid down to $3.8 million. We'll have that down likely to zero by the end of the year. So that's sort of where we were in terms of coming in as a very unfortunate situation. What we've done in the last 3 months to kind of right-size, get Ben prepared to move forward. Where it's been today. Ben's stock price, just to clarify, it's not up 100%. It was 35 cents on July 31st. It was 68 cents. Sorry, yeah, 68 cents a couple days ago. It's around 60 cents, 55, so shade over 100%. So not quite that, but we're not about chasing stock price. We want to build fundamental value because stock prices, the commissioner rightly points out, is volatile. But it is trending in the right direction. It's obviously notwithstanding, or rather perhaps driven by some of the current events, right? The market has shown where they view those current events in terms of supporting the company, supporting the path going forward. The market capitalization is $75 million, thereabouts. That's up from less than 10 when we last spoke. Again, a lot of that's due to the conversion. And total tangible assets remain north of $240 million. So with, and we have 52 employees as of, I think the tangible assets as of October 31st. So, you know, it's fairly current. Ben, going forward, the elephant in the room is obviously the indictment. And as I mentioned, you know, the indictment circumstances of the indictment are consistent with the company's position and what the company's earlier investigation identified. And we had previously, to the indictment, had publicly stated that, you know, we have identified evidence of fraud and that the company will continue to pursue its remedies. That remains the case, right? In terms of what we intend to do, we will continue to pursue our remedies against our, as appropriate for the benefit of the shareholders. And in that regard, while the indictment is upsetting to all of us, and certainly a legitimate red flag for any organization, we are aligned on this, right? We are aligned with the legislator, we're aligned with the commission, we're aligned with the U.S. government about identifying, remedying, and moving forward on this. I'll say as an aside, in circumstances like this, or perhaps in all circumstances, when it comes to being aligned or with the U.S. government or not aligned with the U.S. government, you don't have to be a Venezuelan drug cartel boat driver to know you want to be on the U.S. government side of that. And we're on the U.S. government side of that. So while upsetting, the indictment is actually supports and assists and actually puts the company in a stronger position today than we were in 3 days ago. That's just simply the facts of the matter. It is, again, a tragic tale. It affects me personally, but my commitment is to the company, and we will remedy this. Funding sources continue to be a focus, and we are now currently on SEC filings. We will resume our activities in terms of some of the stock things we do, just standard capital activity. We were also out of the market in terms of our product for the last 3 to 4 months because without an SEC filing, you're out of the market on that. So we're recommencing that. We have a few transactions in the pipeline, but that will be a slower approach, right? That will take that's not going to happen tomorrow, but we have things in the pipeline. And I will tell you that we're here to build these things, do these things in incremental value, right? I'm not going to stand here and say we're going to do $200 million of deals tomorrow and things like that. We've all been told that. As you know, I left a year and a half ago, in part because of sort of the over-promising. We're going to do what companies do in this situation, which is you build your company step by step with progress through, and that does not mean we do not have, we have some fairly attractive opportunities, but we will build the company the way you build a company, which is step by step. We also have talking about initiatives, people want to know where Ben's going. We have also developed over time some very meaningful technology that we will also be looking to sort of monetize over time. But that, again, is a future activity. But the core business of Ben, right, what Ben was intended to address, the market opportunity, if anything, is stronger today than it was 3 years ago. Ben's unique positioning, because of its TEFI charter, and we can talk a little bit more about this, but we are uniquely situated to address this particular market opportunity, unlike any other trust company or any other entity. It should go without saying that obviously a lot of time was spent by the legislature, ourselves, to get to this point, and if it was just another trust charter, it would be certainly, there would have been no reason to do that. And last, as I said, we will continue to protect the interests of the company. We'll continue to protect the interests of our shareholders, Kansas, as it relates to Mr. Heppner and the circumstances behind that. With that, I will stop. I know we have a lot to cover. I don't know if you want to take questions now, but or maybe.
Thanks for that, Mr. Silk. We're going to hold off on questions until we get through everybody with beneficent, and then we can kind of just open it up for a discussion. So thank you so much, sir. Up next, we're going to have former Senator Jeff King. Welcome to committee, sir.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. It's, Senator Francisco, good to see you on the committee as well. I want to be as brief as I can possibly be, just give you a very brief overview of sort of the litigation environment facing beneficent right now. Mr. Chairman, I appreciated the caveat that you opened this committee with of understanding there is an ongoing, still the U.S. Attorney's Office, there are limits to what a publicly traded company can and can't discuss. But within those caveats and limits, certainly want to be fully transparent and open with the committee. The main litigation liability that's been facing beneficent was a lawsuit from GWG, which you may know from previous committee hearings and in the indictment was the other allegedly defrauded entity from the allegations contained therein. The good news is that litigation as it pertains to beneficent is over. There was a settlement that occurred between beneficent and GWG, one that was done within the insurance policy limits. No payments were made directly by beneficent itself. One development that I think is very positive that I do wish to note is there's been a public filing where the attorney for the bankruptcy estate of GWG, i.e. the company that was previously suing beneficent, has actually asked to enter an appearance in beneficent's behalf because that attorney believes that GWG and beneficent are aligned in the fraudulent activities being perpetrated against them by Mr. Heppner and the associated entities as alleged in the indictment. So, what previously was a litigation adversary has become a litigation ally through which I know GWG and as Mr. Silk said, beneficent hopes to examine all of its available legal options to recover from the fraud that was made against it. The second piece of litigation, which is new since we were here last, is a lawsuit pertaining to HCLP, which is the entity itself that was affiliated with Mr. Heppner at the source of the indictment. There was a lawsuit brought, an action undertaken, I should say, in that seeking to recover roughly $112 million of debt that HCLP claims is still held against beneficent. The reason I bring this up in the context of the indictment and why we believe that for beneficent's future prospects, the indictment shows a positive future is that if a fourth of the allegations in this indictment are true, then this $112 million loan supposedly held by HCLP is completely fraudulent. And that is certainly beneficent's position and the position it is taking in this litigation. And beneficent's hope is that successful litigation, which basically is why Mr. Silk talked about the U.S. Attorney's Office and beneficent being aligned on this point. If this activity is indeed fraudulent, that frees up $112 million in debt and the $150 million roughly in assets that are collateral for that debt to help beneficent's bottom line and to be used to further beneficent's business. So we are optimistic on that litigation front that it will provide additional prospects for beneficent going forward in the future. The final point I want to make before turning it over to Alan and Derek is none of the allegations in this indictment, as the commissioner highlighted, and I certainly appreciate that, pertain to BFF itself, pertain to Kansas. None of them put the over $25 million of money that was used, that beneficent has contributed to Kansas at all at risk. That money is in Kansas, it stayed at Kansas. There is no risk to Kansans or those funds from any of these allegations. Having said that, and even as I was writing that, preparing to come here, still in some sense that feels a little hollow. And Mr. Chairman, you use the word disappointed, and I will certainly use the word disappointed, but you are a more polite man than I, and as someone who in front of this committee has sat next to Mr. Hepner on multiple occasions, if these allegations are true, I'm not just disappointed, I'm angry. And I'm guessing a number of you are angry as well. The thing that I ask, and I will personally state, having kicked the tires and looked at the business model that Beneficient brings, I still believe this business model is a strong one and that it can work. With hundreds of millions of dollars of a millstone of alleged fraud removed from around the neck of Beneficient, some time to see if that will work, I remain optimistic and hope that the anger at the allegations of one individual can turn into something that still can be positive for the state. With that, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Up next, we're going to have Alan Dinas. Alan, welcome to the committee, sir.
I think a chair gets harder every day. My remarks are fairly brief because it's going to focus on a relationship with the banking department and the recent exam. And I want to tell you that we received the written document, the exam, on October 22nd. We've been working on a written response to it. My judgment, there's parts of the exam that are absolutely correct, things we need to work on. There's a lot of it that I think needs some work on the part of the state. And what it really highlights is the fact that it's difficult for us to communicate with them. A lot of times there's things that if there had been a phone call, probably could have resolved the issue fairly quickly. Instead, we lob emails back and forth, and we don't necessarily get a satisfactory result. My thinking is that the exam lasted almost a year. I only recall 2 meetings with the examiners during that time where we sat down and had a conversation. We delivered probably at least 2,000 documents, so it's a fairly complicated process for the examiners, and frankly, it's not something that I think I could do. I don't have the patience for it. But, they worked through it, but they could have used more documents, and all they had to do was ask for them. I'm curious about where the commissioner wants to go in terms of regulation. One instance, I hear that he wants some with regards to maybe a liquidation process. We're open to that. We've actually had some discussions in the last few years about it, how it would work, what it would take. And the thing I would throw out is maybe we follow the big bank example where we put together a living will. Forces us to think about those issues, how it would work, and it helps educate the state in terms of how they would approach it and what they think. I'm a pretty optimistic person, and so I haven't thought about the downside, but it's something that we should do and should work out, and we're willing to work with the state on that part if they want to. It's important to communicate back and forth. I hate to talk about war stories, but in the old days when my partner and I worked with troubled banks around the state, and actually several states, we sat down with the regulators once a month and went over what was going on in that bank. Just sit across the desk and have a chat, talk about it, talk about what our problems were, what we were going to do about it, what kinds of things could we do to make their life easier. That's missing in this go-around. Relationship is adversarial, and there's no reason for it. We do want to work with the state. I don't think that we're being cavalier about it. It's just that it's hard, and we have to do the work to do it, and I'd invite the state to participate with that. With that, I'll leave my comments. I really thought there would be more questions later on, and most of what we talk about in terms of the exam is we can't disclose it, so it really limits what we can talk about. But we're here if you have questions. We certainly want to answer them.
Thank you so much for that, Alan. Last up, we're going to call Derek Fletcher back up, or up for the first time, not back up. Derek, welcome to the committee, sir.
And thank you, committee members, for allowing us the opportunity to testify. My name is Derek Fletcher. I'm the President and Chief Fiduciary Officer for, thank you, Beneficent Fiduciary Financial. Here today to really talk about the developments and the assets that have been delivered to Kansas overall, as well as since our last meeting on July 31st. But before doing that, certainly feel the need and desire to speak directly to the recent developments that have understandably caused concern. The the news over the last few months, and in particular the last 48 hours, has been disappointing, troubling, and quite frankly, for me, one of sadness. Relationships are built on trust, whether that's personal or professional. And when that trust gets violated or broken, it has really far-ranging implications. And over the last 4 years, I've had the good fortune, as my colleagues have as well, of being able to come before this committee, coming before other committees in this building, and testifying about the work that we're doing, and the opportunity to work with many of you directly. And I've always felt that those relationships have been based on mutual respect and integrity, and I value that. My goal then and my goal now is to be transparent and accountable, and my commitment to that remains unchanged. And so for myself personally, as well as the members of our team, I'm committed to earning, maintaining, and certainly honoring the trust and respect that this committee, that the Commissioner's Office, that the people of Kansas have entrusted us with. And we understand the seriousness of the moment and the circumstances that have arisen, and we're committed to moving forward with integrity. I do want to say that as troubling as the recent news is, there are elements that remain unchanged. BFF has a viable business and offers a service that addresses a need that's unmet in the market. As James mentioned, we have over 50 employees, men and women who have actually built this business, right? People of integrity who are committed to delivering to our shareholders, to one another, and to the citizens of this state. And as I'll talk about in a moment, our operations continue to bring real value to rural communities across the state of Kansas. Assets that have been delivered, assets that are secure, and that is something, when I testified 4 years ago, that the assets delivered to the state of Kansas are safe and secure, and it was true then, and it's true today. As you know, and as we've talked about, Mr. Heppner left the company in June, and as I mentioned at our meeting at the end of July, I couldn't be more happy with the fact that we were able to convince James to come back to lead us. Under his leadership, we've worked to execute on the business plan to address these challenging issues, but in an environment of integrity and honesty and trust, and the ability to have conversations and trust, difficult conversations, in an environment where you're free to express your mind, and that hasn't always been the case. But we also understand, as I stand here today with a lot of words coming out, that to deliver on our responsibility takes more than words, and it takes action. And we're committed to doing that right and methodically, and again, with integrity. In our PowerPoint deck, really on pages, I guess page 10, slide 10, we can kind of skip to there. BFF, as you will see, has delivered over $25 million of cash and assets to the state of Kansas, about $4 million of which is the assessments that, as the commissioner spoke to, are allocated and divided between the banking department and the Department of Commerce. We have made, in addition to that $4 million, there have been cash distributions made out to the Economic Growth Zone Initiative of over $9 million. And then, as Mrs. Govert testified, around 12 million, just shy of 12 million of beneficial interest in these underlying alternative asset investments. Since our last meeting, the company, as James referenced, there's been some asset sales and has distributed about $820,000. And if we could go just to the next slide. Thank you. I know this might send us all into hypnosis to try to read all of this, but you will see at the very bottom on October 3rd and then again on November 4th, over $400,000 in total has been distributed. One thing that I do want to point out, and this kind of speaks to a question that Representative King had at our last hearing, and that is the kind of the amount of the distributions, the allocation of the distributions. And so in this chart, as you study it, you will see that in the second column on the left, the statutory requirement under the TEFI Act required a distribution of $8.3 million. That being allocated among the Department of Commerce and the Heartland Foundation. And then you will see in the second column from the right that the way that BFF has structured the trust and the funding is we actually have funded over $1 million above and beyond what's required by the statute. So rather than the 8.3 total funding, BFF has funded 9.3 million, the purpose of which certainly is to try to accelerate the economic growth in various rural communities, including the development of the grocery store in Heston, but also to provide a fund so that if there are expenses associated with the project, so as Mrs. Govert mentioned, Swindle Jansen, the accounting firm, that there are funds available to pay those expenses so it doesn't erode what would otherwise be distributable to the foundation or the Department of Commerce. A couple of other items, and I wanted to highlight this. I know the Commissioner had mentioned that our funding had been minimal, and I wanted just to highlight the fact that again, certainly not to the level that we had expected, that we had hoped, that we had projected when the TEFI Act was originally passed, but we do not consider, on behalf of BFF, $9.3 million of cash going to these communities as being minimal. Finally, the circumstances that we all are aware of, the indictment, I just want to make it clear that this had, other than the obvious, but no financial impact on BFF. The funds that were alleged to have been procured through fraudulent activities did not affect the assets of BFF. It did not affect the assets of the Heartland Foundation. It did not affect the assets that were distributed and are distributable to the Department of Commerce. As I mentioned, those assets are secure. This was at, as you read, at the GWG level and certainly at the parent company level, but had no direct financial implications at all to our operating entity here in Kansas. With that, Mr. Chairman, I will cease my comments, and certainly we are available as a group for any questions the committee might have.
Thank you so much for that, Derek. All right, committee, we're going to open it up for questions. When I call on you, just which one of the four you have your question for, call them up and ask the question. If you have more than one person you want to ask a question of, that's fine too. We've got time and we need to have a discussion. So with that, we're going to open it up for questions. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll leave this to whoever would like to answer it. The bank commissioner kind of repeatedly said that you could run your business without the existing state charter and the existing TEFI Act. Can one of you speak to whether that's actually the case?
Thank you, Senator. No. In fact, the unique charter, many trust companies can simply hold assets in trust. We hold assets through a tiered structure involving loans that allow us to hold those assets on our own balance sheet, which is one reason why when you look at the risks of who is affected by these things, the primary beneficiary of many of these trusts is Beneficient itself, or BFF itself, and ultimately Beneficient. That is not a common structure in the trust company space. It hopefully should go without saying but I'll say it. Obviously, a lot of time was spent by the members on this committee and elsewhere passing a statute. We all worked with the commissioner. We worked with you guys. A lot of time was spent. We didn't spend that time to pass a statute to get authorities that we could go to any state and get. So that's the brief answer.
I'll just add on to that, if, Senator, if you were to create a company with the Secretary of State, as the Commissioner had indicated, and then sought to serve or appointed your entity as trustee of a trust, my firm belief is that the banking department would send a cease and desist letter to you because your entity would not have trust powers, which are only conferred upon trust companies, banks with trust departments, et cetera. So our ability to serve as trustee of these trusts that hold the alternative assets is all predicated on having trust powers, which obviously then instills the need to have regulatory oversight of a body that ensures that you not only have the trust powers, but you're effectuating those appropriately.
Is that it, Senator? Okay. Committee, any further questions? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you all for your presentations. You had one of your slides in there as 2024 examination schedule. So BSA went through, it started in April, finished in August. I think when you sit down and decide, how that examination went, don't they do accepted or unaccepted? I just wondered how that part of it come out. And the other part, IT is not due till November 14th, but I think IT had done it before. Just give us a little history on those parts.
Okay. The BSA is bank secrecy. It's money laundering, and any financial institution undergoes it. Casinos undergo it even. It's because it's about money movement. It has its own separate set of examination requirements. The examiner that the state uses for that has special training, and usually it's done separately from everything else just to minimize the impact on the organization that's being examined. I don't remember exact dates on when it was completed, but we had a satisfactory result. So, which is the best you can get, I think. So, the IT exam, again, it is, in the banking world, it's peculiar in that it's really more about your computer systems and your safeguards, and it doesn't deal with banking very much at all. It's more about, do you have a safe system? Is it tough to hack? Is it accurate? Do you have backup in case something happens? All of those kinds of things. And that one went generally fine as well. And again, because of the nature of it, it's a separate type exam. The compliance exam is more expansive, looking at a series of statutes and regulations, and it just because of the size of it, it takes longer. I don't know if we'll ever, and it's probably more a question for the state, but if they will ever get it below, the time that it takes. It's just simply because of the volume of the documents that the examiners have to read. That one, you've heard the commissioners going to grace us with a enforcement action. I haven't seen it. There's been no discussion of its contents. Likely it will follow the outline of the exam, and we'll deal with certain bullet points. So,
Mr. Chairman, so as we went through this process and all the issues that's come up, I think the market was part of this too. COVID played into this, didn't it, as far as new business and what goes on in your process? And that's looking brighter as we look forward. I think I kind of heard that. So,
yeah, I think it is. I don't deal directly with that. We have a sales team and websites and such that we do that. But there is stuff in the pipeline. You know, it's the delay in getting some of our 10Q and 10K filed slowed that down. We're past that. Things are starting to heat up again. So,
thank you.
Okay. Senator Owens?
Yeah, thank you. Another one came to mind, and this probably is better suited for Mr. Silk, actually, Alan. James, I'm sitting here looking at the letter that is dated August 26th that was sent to the Commissioner's office and CC'd to some people on this committee as well as others, where you specifically, pledge your willingness to work with the State Banking Commissioner in creating these industry regulations. And I'll be honest, I really thought that as part of the original TEFI Act and subsequent legislation, there was somewhat of an expectation that this would occur. Can you speak a little bit more to the OSBC or their willingness to engage in a meaningful conversation around actually creating industry standards? Because as I understood from the bank commissioner, they don't feel that they have the authority to even do so. Is that information you were aware of?
Again, I may be also, I think Derek can maybe chime in. That was perhaps, that was news to me. I can speak for me personally. I guess in my letter I would not have put that in there if I didn't think that by one way or another that the commission had the authority to either issue regulations or, as many, in my experience, a long time attorney dealing with many regulators, interpret the existing regulations in a way that made sense. And I think there's, but I cannot speak more highly of the commission and the work that they do. And I know we are a complicated business, and I think we recognize we are a complicated business, which is the genesis of my letter, of really the view of all of us. So I was not aware sort of limitations on the regulations, but I will just reiterate it once again. We have a 100% engagement policy. We'll be here, we'll be there. The legislature saw fit, and we certainly supported the idea that any TEFI has to have offices in Kansas, staffed with people, have a compliance person. We have all our records there. Senator Owens, as you mentioned, you walk by. If people wanted to see the records, you walk in and you get the records. They're there. If you have questions about them, come by, or we're happy to come here. So just reiterate that.
Thank you, Mr. Silk. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, any further questions? Oh, I'm sorry, Alan, did you want to address something?
To address the regulation issue, and I'm going to apologize, I don't have the sites, but there are two places in the TEFI legislation that speak to the commissioner issuing regulations. One's early in it in terms of enacting regulations by January of 22. There's another one later on talks about regulations in terms of materials that we can use in our marketing process and can evaluate those and make sure that they meet some standard. The banking statute, the entire banking code, before you get to Chapter 23, there is a fairly expansive statute about the governor, or not the governor, the commissioner issuing regulations. And the theory behind it is that that's what brings the statute to life, that fills out the gaps, that's the meat on the bones kind of a thing. And so I think the commissioner has ample authority to issue regulations. He's just chosen not to.
Committee, any further questions? I think Representative King, did you have something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. Maybe for Senator King. You mentioned that the fraud that you hope to recoup was mainly the millstone around the HCLP. Is, I think, the $112 million, something like that?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Representative. There are two, I'd say two separate millstones that I want to separate with that. There is HCLP's claim that there is still existing debt owed to it by beneficent. That amount is roughly $112 million. So to be clear, the entity that was the primary entity in an indictment that came down this week, controlled by the individual alleged to have committed fraud in that indictment, claims that it still owed $112 million by beneficent. If any part of that indictment is true and believed in a court of law, the validity of that $112 million is strongly suspect. It's going to be void. And so that millstone, we are confident that the indictment actually increases the chances that that will be taken from around the neck of beneficent. Beneficent has already, in servicing the allegedly fraudulent debt for HCLP, already paid in excess of that amount. And the indictment talks about roughly $150 million. That's just the amount that passed through from GWG. There are additional funds that were paid to service that as well. Beneficent is considering all of its legal options regarding that amount and certainly retains the right to seek recoupment of that to the extent the assets exist.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr.
Committee, any further questions? I've got a few here. Mr. Silk, I'll go ahead and call you up. Is this your first time in Kansas, by the way?
No. Okay. Been here a bunch of times.
Awesome. Love to hear that.
A delicious Kansas City steak yesterday. So
yeah,
thank you for that. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no, it's great. We have great food here in Kansas. First, I'll just be point blank with this question. Is beneficent and the TEFI Act built on fraud and lies?
No.
Is it a sustainable business model?
Yes.
Okay. I assume beneficent and you personally understand our frustration, the frustration of this committee and the legislature as a whole. I've heard from other members of the legislature their frustration with this. We definitely feel deceived. We were sold a lemon car, basically. Can you talk a little bit about why you believe, A, it wasn't built on fraud and lies, and B, it is a sustainable business model for the future?
It's not the market opportunity that was initially presented years ago, as we went to, is as strong, if not stronger, right? The retailization of alternative assets or alternative investments, how we're going to characterize them, continues to grow, right? The need for liquidity increases accordingly. Ben is uniquely positioned to solve many of those liquidity needs. So the market opportunity is there. The structure in terms of Ben's unique sort of market advantages are there. What is limiting right now is the currency to get the deals done, which is the cash and the stock, and that's the thing we need to slowly build. And I think to the extent that there was a, I'll be generous and say over-optimism by my predecessor, you know, it was on that, the ability to create the currency to take advantage of the market opportunity to the scale that he was talking about was probably predicated on overly optimistic views or sort of perfect scenario views.
So this question here, you can answer it if Derek wants to take it. During the last meeting, I believe we met last in July, we were told that all workers' comp claims, wages, labor, orders in Texas were solved. They were either found as not credible or they've been paid out. We have been, members of this committee, I know I have, I'm not sure who else has been reached out by people who say that's not the case, and that there are still active claims of back wages owed to them and judgments in Texas on their behalf. Could either of you guys speak to that?
I guess I believe the short answer is that we have received many favorable outcomes and some non-favorable outcomes. Some of those are under appeal, continue to go through the legal process. The ones that were on both sides of the equation, to the extent they continue to be under appeal, they continue to follow the legal process. We believe we're in the right position on many of those, and in fact, on appeal have actually gotten those dismissed. So I'm not aware of any, of sort of final judgment. Now, people may have had an initial claim awarded, and now that's following the legal appeal process, but perhaps clarify.
Yeah. So at our meeting in July, there had been a report in one of the media publications that there were these amounts owed and hadn't been paid, and that they had been awarded the claims. As James said, and for the committee's benefit, maybe in total 8 employees over the course of a good number of years that claimed that they were owed certain bonus amounts that the company took the position were not owed. My testimony at that hearing was that report was inaccurate in terms of that we had been ordered to pay it and we had refused to pay. As James mentioned, we had appealed, gone through the process, and just to kind of give a quick flavor, there would be a claim. Claim was actually dismissed. Worker would file an appeal, be appeals hearing, then there would be a determination, then we would appeal. So it's still in the spectrum of kind of the legal process. As James mentioned, a significant amount of that has been dismissed and found in the company's favor, but we are still going through that process. And Mr. Chairman, if I could, and simply to highlight, because James is kind of too modest to do so, in terms of is there a viable business, something that I can tell you, we all believe it, we're all working for it, we know it to be the case, but something that I think has injected the optimism and frankly adrenaline within the company is you've got James Silk and you've got Tom Hicks who take a position of their preferred stock, which puts them at the top of the capital structure. They agree to convert that to common to align with all of the common shareholders of the company. They agree to take on nothing but downside risk. They give up all the upside risk or upside opportunity. And if that doesn't speak to me, it speaks to people within the company that not only say they believe it, but they put their money where their mouth is. And I just want to highlight that because, again, James wouldn't do that on his own accord, but we believe it. And the leaders within the company have made the investment to show that they believe it, and that's done nothing but just permeate through the company of kind of, again, kind of a fresh sense of the future for the company. So.
Sorry. Yeah. Just briefly on to that. I think to answer your first question, it's important to understand the distinction between a fraud perpetrated by a business model and a fraud perpetrated on a business model. If you look at even throughout the affidavit, or the indictment, but on paragraphs 8 and 9 of the indictment in particular, it details very specifically the U.S. Attorney of the Southern District of New York's belief that this was an outside fraud perpetrated on an otherwise viable, successful business model in order to siphon off proceeds of that model for an illicit purpose. There is no allegation anywhere in here that the business model itself was fraudulent or involved in this at all. And that is a distinction I think is important for the committee to consider and understand, not that it makes it any easier to swallow in some extents, but hopefully gives some satisfaction and comfort that the model itself can work going forward.
I appreciate that. And I think a few minutes ago I heard Representative King refer to you as Senator King. Senator King has a good ring to it. I'm not sure how Senator Owens feels about that.
Senator Owens, would you like to comment on that?
James, I have one more question for you, and others may want to chime in too if they wish. We heard testimony from the Heartland Charitable Foundation, and their goal is, their hope is to get this stood up by 2027. One of the concerns I'm looking at, and I have, is the BI, the beneficial interest in alternative assets, that amount and the ability to get liquidated and liquidated at a good price. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, we've been liquidating assets, and the price, again, we do it when it makes sense for us. I can say on Friday we liquidated a little bit north of $8 million of assets at 100% of NAV. That's not going to be typical, but obviously we are going to do these things when it makes sense, and by extension, when it makes sense for the foundation. And as, again, these are the assets as of today. We are looking to put on more assets. Every time we put on assets, those assets go onto the balance sheet of the foundation. So it's a growing thing. I think I'm excited, having sat down with Denise. And again, I'm not PFF, so I've not been on the foundation meetings, but I'm very excited about Denise because her sense of community, the growth that she's looking at, the incorporation of the community, and sort of ensuring that what's being built is what the community wants and not necessarily beyond that, or not, so I'm very, very heartened by that, and confident that they will have the access that they need for the, and again, as Derek has noted, right, early on in the process, recognizing that there are delays on the cash flows, Ben has overcommitted to the foundation to the tune of over $1 million to ensure that those cash needs are being met. I don't see why there would ever be any change in that philosophy. So I don't know what more to say other than to say, we're committed to the company, we're committed to Kansas, and we're committed to Heston.
Okay. Yeah, and that's basically what I hear. I wanted to hear a commitment from you guys, because when this first came about, one of the big draws was the Heston grocery store. And it has been, I understand, as Senator Fack put it, we were going through COVID at the time as well, and things get delayed. But in those delays, we also see inflation just running rampant, and things are getting a lot more expensive. And quite frankly, I'll be honest, the tariffs don't help on that front either. So that's what I want to hear, is a commitment from you guys to do everything. Because while others may have made the promise of the grocery store, it's still BFF and beneficent at the end of the day that grocery store to that community. So I wanted to hear you guys are committed to do everything in your power. Even 2027, we'll see. We'll love to have it up by then. But anything in your guys' power to make sure that gets done.
Absolutely, we have that commitment.
Yep. Chair Dietrich.
Thank you. Thank you, and thank you for being here. Really appreciate it. I know these are never the most probably desired committee meetings that you go to, but I apologize for that, I guess. The other thing I would say is, and I'm very glad to hear you say committed to Kansas as well, because some of those dollars that have gone into the Commerce Department have really been used wisely with the seed grants and have been distributed to our rural communities. And I represent a whole county, Bunsen County, it's very rural, that really has taken advantage of that. And I know, of course, out of 105 counties, I'm not the only one, but I really do appreciate the ability to be able to use those dollars for really wonderful projects in our smaller towns. So, no, it's not necessarily Heston, but
we have that commitment. We are committed to that as well. And I think, again, just going back to what Denise said, I think it's incredibly important to have these things be sustainable, right? Not one-shot deals that need to be constantly funded. And again, I don't want to say what state I'm from, but it was a smaller town in that state, at least, over in the Northeast. But, I've seen what a little bit of investment can do in terms of starting the flywheel on development. And there's so much talent, so many opportunities, so many unique resources in these smaller towns that a lot of times it doesn't take a great deal to create a sustainable project. And that's, I think, and we're committed to doing that.
Sometimes it just provides that energy that they need to be able to get from point A to point B. So,
And sometimes it's just simply putting the right people in the room together.
thank you.
Senator Fack.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Silk, I want to say thank you, big time. I know the day that you announced that preferred stock deal, it jumped to $1.49. I don't know if anybody knows that, but that tells me what the market thinks of you trying to back what you're saying here.
Thank you.
The question I have for you is that when you look at the TIFI model and what we've got set up in Kansas, and it being very unique, do you still feel that that is a model that if we can go out and market that and make that work, that that's a future? We've talked about what we've done, good things. I'm looking for the future on this thing. So this is kind of where I would like you to expound on TIFI and what you see in the United States and what Kansas is doing in that kind of deal or has the potential to do.
Yeah, I still believe the TIFI model has a lot of application for other firms outside the state. It needs to be twofold, right? It needs to be supported internally within the state, and then it needs to be, we have to demonstrate the business model. Quite frankly, for the state, the best thing would be that someone comes in and says, we can do it better than Ben can, right? That's what, that's really the sort of the next step. In terms of what the opportunity set is, it still remains true that it is the uniqueness of the TIFI charter gives a tool set to both firms, companies that want to start a sort of a single trust company similar to BFF, but also larger firms like a KKR to basically incorporate that into their broader structure. So those opportunities still exist. We at Ben have to do a better job of executing on our business plan. That's plain and simple. And then obviously I think we need to do a better job working with the commissioner and making sure he understands where we're coming from so we can get on the same page on that. I think you put those two things together where we have a more welcoming regulatory environment. I said this before and it was mentioned today, and I appreciate the commissioner's views, but it goes without saying that there's not a single, if I were outside counsel to any of the clients that I represented back in my prior, before Ben, I would tell them don't bother picking up a pen yet until there's clarity on whether or not this is this is here to stay.
Committee, any further questions? I see none. Thank you so much, Mr. Silk, Mr. King, Mr. Dynas, Mr. Fletcher, for being here today and answering some tough questions. I would encourage us all to just make sure we're communicating, make sure we're all working together. If we're going to make this thing work, that's the only way that it's going to happen. So thank you so much, sir.
And thank you all.
Yep. Before we get to recommendations, I am going to allow Commissioner Hernan, if you would like to do any rebuttals to what was claimed. Do you have anything to add, sir? No, sir. Okay. Okay. I just wanted to give you that opportunity. So with that, committee, we are on to committee discussion and recommendations to the legislature. We'll just open this floor up for any recommendations or thoughts or comments. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I wanted to put on the record 2021 House Bill 2074, which is the original enacting legislation for the technology-enabled fiduciary financial institutions. On Section 22 of that legislation says, pursuant to KSA 9-1713 and amendments thereto, the Commissioner shall adopt rules and regulations on or before January 1, 2022, as are necessary to administer this Act. The Office of the State Bank Commissioner may enter into contracts for technical assistance and professional services as are necessary to administer the provisions of this Act and to meet the deadlines for adoption of rules and regulations provided by this Act. I think it's very clear, at least the way that I read that and interpret that, that there was an expectation that the Office of the State Banking Commissioner adopt rules and regulations for this industry. And so my recommendation would be to direct, encourage, I don't know what the right language is, the Office of the State Banking Commissioner to engage with beneficent or any other private, in this language right here, any other private or professional technical assistance necessary to actually create rules and regulations as it pertains to the TEFI industry, and to engage earnestly in doing so, because it was supposed to be completed by January 1 of 2022. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, is that an actual motion? Recommendation?
As a recommendation, it certainly is. If you need a motion, I'm happy to make said motion, or if it's just a recommendation that needs to be put in the report, I'll leave that to your discretion.
I think we'll consider that a motion, and see if we get a second from Representative King. Just for clarification, we restate the motion so staff can get it.
Sure. Pursuant to 2021 House Bill 2074, Section 22, it states, pursuant to KSA 9-1713, amendment thereto, the Commissioner shall adopt rules and regulations on or before January 1 as are necessary to administer this act. My motion directs the Office of State Banking Commissioner to earnestly engage in their legislative responsibility to create those regulations pursuant to the law passed. That's it.
Okay, I'm going to turn to staff on this one question, the word direct.
Encourage, maybe?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm good with whatever. Obviously, they're an executive branch function. I can't force their hand on anything.
Yeah, and I think this committee is just being an oversight committee out of session. I don't think we can direct, but encourage may be the word to go with. David, is that good? You got it? Committee, do we have a motion and a second? Do we have any further discussion? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't mind this motion. I'll vote for it, but I think it also makes sense, and I'll make a separate motion after we're done voting on this one, that if we are going to encourage them to do this and establish regulations, then I think that we should also give them the ability to revoke the charter if the industry does not follow the regulations, which they currently, I believe, are not able to do. So that will be a separate motion coming.
Committee, any further discussions on the Owens motion? Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I agree with Senator Owens' deal. The thing I would encourage, if this passes, is that we take and make sure that the bank commissioner pulls in the industry people to help formulate those regulations, to at least have ideas and suggestions, because we're trying to work on something to build for tomorrow. And the people that are actually doing it ought to be part of trying to give suggestions that are being heard by the banking commissioner.
I would be curious to know too, and this is feedback we can get, because, you know, quite frankly, my committee will be looking at the TEFI Act as we get into session, just depending on how it goes the next few months. Will kind of dictate at what point we're looking at it. But I would also like to know if there are changes within the legislation that OSBC feels they need to be able to accomplish this. And if there are, what are those changes? What are those tweaks to allow them to accomplish this recommendation? So any further questions or, I'm sorry, comments or discussion on Owen's motion? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate your comments, because I think my question, and perhaps another suggestion is, could the reviser's staff help us understand what are the limitations to enacting regulations based on the current wording of the TEFI Act? Because I think it's one thing to just say, adopt regulations. It's quite another to make sure that those regulations are in areas that are allowed with the current wording in that act. Does that make sense?
Yeah, David, are you prepared to answer that now, or do we need some time and research, and you can send an email out at a further date?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I think on that issue, we probably want to have a little more time on that to research, and I guess I might want to have Senator maybe restate the request or something.
Please.
So my understanding just from discussions, and I'm sorry I haven't participated in previous meetings of this committee, was that there are some limitations based on the wording or the act itself as to what the Office of the Bank Commissioner can do. If that's the case, I'm thinking that also might limit what areas they can propose regulations. So I'm wondering if the reviser could help us understand, if regulations are adopted, what is the scope that would qualify to still meet the current wording of the act. And then I think that'll help us understand, do we need to change something so that we can actually get regulations that both the company and the bank commissioner can be comfortable following?
And David, do you need permission from myself or this committee to reach out to the OSBC and I guess get their thoughts on what is the holdup that they consider in the legislation from promulgating rules and regs?
Again, Mr. Yeah, I think if that's a direct direction of the committee, that would be appropriate. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I believe that is the intent of Senator Francisco's recommendation to, or thought. I guess it's not really a recommendation, just more of a request of the revisor's office. So we are back on the Owens motion. Any further discussion?
Just to follow up, if I might, Mr. Chairman. Thank you. So I agree with the clarification. I think simply put, my intention of this motion is simply to see Section 22 of the original legislation actually completed. And it does say that they shall adopt rules and regulations by a certain date as are necessary to administer the act. So it really is, we're asking them to ultimately create those rules and regulations, go through the normal process of rules and regulations to administer the law as it has been currently written. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All righty, with that, no further discussion. All in favor, aye?
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Oh, okay, so Representative Shu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, I'll make the motion now to, that I would make a motion that we amend the TEFI Act to allow the state, Office of the State Banking Commissioner to revoke a charter if their regulations are not carried out.
If the current regulations are not carried out.
Or if the new regulations that, once they implement the ones that from Senator Owens' motions are not carried out, once they're in place, if the company does not comply, I think that the officers should have the ability to revoke that charter.
Do you want, just in your motion, do you want a date certain for those new regulations to?
I think just make it dependent on Senator Owens' motion, just kind of once those regulations are put in.
Okay.
I'm recommending amending the TEFI Act to allow.
You're recommending this committee introduce a bill,
sure,
a sponsored bill with those, yeah, make those amendments. Okay. Sure. And you guys, we got that motion down, and we do need a second. Second by Representative Osmond. We will now open it up for discussion. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm not opposed to the overall concept, so there are a couple of questions that I have. I think we've proven that the office, well, I can't say proven. It is of my opinion that the Office of the State Banking Commissioner is hostile towards this act as a whole. I think it's been proven over the last 3 years that they don't particularly like this legislation. They believe, I think they've even said that they believe that it should be repealed as a whole. So my question along that vein is there any kind of an appeal process in the revocation of that charter? What would that look like just from a perspective of, again, it's obvious that the Bank Commissioner office currently as it exists wish this act didn't exist. And are we opening a door for them to do that through an authority that we are granting them to remove the only existing charter?
Sure, I'm not opposed to changing my motion to include an allowable appeal, certainly.
Okay, so I would just, yeah, just like to make sure that we address that a process would have to be created. Obviously, this is predicated on future rules and regs that haven't even been promulgated. And so maybe that this legislation should wait until after that is vetted out and then we do that, because I agree. We should absolutely hold beneficent and any other TEFI account to the law as it is written, or there should be repercussions, and which could include the loss of a charter. I just want to make sure that we vet that out thoroughly to ensure the right process occurs and the right challenges.
Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just, along those lines of discussion, what comes to mind is what holds them to following either the plan now or the regulations to come. So from a state charter banking standpoint, the State Banking Commission can revoke state bank charters, so why not also have that option as well?
If I may. So this charter is a little bit different in that the legislature forced the hand of the State Banking Commissioner to issue the charter. So it really wasn't the State Bank Commission that issued the charter, it was the legislature that issued the charter. So giving now the Bank Commissioner the authority to revoke a charter that was issued by the legislature really should have some significant check and balances in, because arguably one should say that because the legislature is the one that issued the charter, we should be the one solely to revoke it. But if we want to give that authority to the bank commissioner, we just need to make sure that there are appropriate checks and balances in place.
And go ahead. Yeah, please.
Just to follow up, I mean, I understand coming from putting, the legislature putting it on this OSBC, but, saying that's a hostile environment already. Now we just advised them in a way to create rules and regs. So, I'm trying to think of a way moving forward where, in Kansas, we create a better environment of being able to grow in this industry, but at what cost if we don't have any teeth to it? Thank you. That's all.
Before we have further discussion, Representative Shu, you indicated that you'd be open to amending your motion to add an appropriate appeal process. Have we done that yet? If you want to.
Sure, I'll change my original motion to add in to have an appeal in there as well.
Appropriate appeal process, and the second is good with that. So that is now the new motion. Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In the amendment, so we have an appeal. Who do you appeal to?
You want me to answer that?
I would have to double check, there's probably existing processes as well. I'm sure it happens with current charters, but I don't know the exact process.
Yeah, I think that question would be hammered out in our respective committees during session. If directed and we brought the bill up for hearings and to work it, that would be something that the respective committees would have to figure out.
So the reason I asked that, when I was mayor, somebody would appeal something and the city manager didn't like it, they would appeal. Well, guess who they appealed to? The city manager. That's why I'm saying that.
And maybe, I don't know how, to Representative Shu's point, I don't know how this whole process usually works, but it could be an appeal process to, let's say, the State Finance Council or to LCC or something like that. That way there is still some legislative, because to Senator Owen's point, it was legislators that codified this in the statute. So maybe that appeal process is to the State Finance Council or to LCC. That way we do still have some legislative input on repealing it.
Follow up, Mr. Chairman. Would this just follow into the rules and regulations? If we're going to develop these things, that'd just be part of that instead of having it separate by itself? Just a thought.
I don't know if that would work. I don't know. I think they're explicitly not allowed to revoke a charter in the TEFI Act currently, and so I don't think a rule and regulation could overrule that.
It would take an active statute. It would take the legislator to doing it. So, any further discussion on the Shu motion? Senator Francisco. Yeah, I'm sorry. 1 second. you can take that. I'll go to.
Sure.
Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to clarify, I don't see this necessarily following issuing new regulations. I hope that might come about, but our wording on section 22 was this, as are necessary to administer this act. So if the Office of Banking Commissioner doesn't feel that they have a role for oversight, they may have simply said, well, we don't have any role here, so there's nothing to do to administer the act. So I don't think we're waiting necessarily. I think it would be good for the committees to discuss this opportunity to be able to repeal a charter.
Thank you for that. Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just thinking about the appeal process and needing to put somebody in there. I mean, we've all been kind of sitting through this for a couple years now, most of us, and then most of us kind of have our minds wrapped around it. I don't know that like the LCC or State Finance Council, we'd have to like bring them up to speed on kind of what all the TEFI is. So I would say maybe appeal to this committee as a kind of a placeholder, and then we'll go from there.
I don't oppose that or object to that at all. I'm just going to turn to the reviser to see if a interim committee can have that power. And if that's the case, there's a lot more I want to do. Buddy boy, if we can. Oh, man.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I think there would probably be some concerns about granting that kind of power to a joint legislative committee.
Let's.
I mean, I think you could either do something like with the existing, any sort of existing revocation for a bank or trust company to try to mirror off of that, or it could be an appeal to the Judicial Review Act, goes to court. Something like that would probably be.
So, yeah, Representative Hsu, if you want to do LCC as the placeholder, and as we get into session, if and when we hear this bill, work this bill, we could have done further research and figured something out on that.
Yeah, LCC works for now.
Okay. Okay. Committee, is there any further discussion on the Hsu motion? I see.
You exactly what the
Yep, I'm going to have staff just repeat it.
Well, I might defer to Representative Hsu to make sure it's correct.
Sure. The motion is to recommend legislation amending the TEFI Act, allowing the Office of the State Banking Commissioner to revoke a charter if a company within the charter is in violation of the rules and regulations that they impose.
Did everybody get that? Do they need further clarification on the motion? Oh, I'm sorry, the appeal process.
With the appeal process to the LCC.
Okay. Okay, any further discussion? Senator Francisco.
Are we worried just about meeting the requirements of the regulations, or are we also concerned about meeting requirements of the statute?
All of the above, sure.
If so, you might want to expand it to say meeting the statute and rules and
How many more
regs.
times we can?
Sure, regulations and
your
statute.
motion.
Sure, yeah.
Good Lord. Have it right the first time. All right, any further discussion on the Hsu motion? The second, you okay? I think he's.
Second, would that be like fourth?
We're about on that. All right, seeing no further discussion on the Hsu motion, all those in favor, aye? All opposed? Motion passes. Senator Fagg, you're a no on that? Do you want it recorded as a no?
Well, in an explanation of vote says that I would like to see exactly what's written. You know, that's what I concern myself with is I understand the concept, but, you know, actually what comes out, I might feel totally different. So that's why I'm saying that.
I completely understand that. David, is there a way also, I mean, we've already voted, you're a no, and no issue with that. David, is there any way though, once this is drafted, that we could send it out to the committee members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I think part of the clarification would be for this bill, would it be as part of that motion to have this pre-filed so that would be out prior to session as the joint committee bill, and then pre-filed in both chambers, or?
Yeah, let's go both chambers. We'll go with both chambers. Yeah, we'll figure all that out later. All right, so we're going to go to Chair Dietrich.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. This kind of ties into what we've been talking about the communication piece. And so we heard and we read in the documents that were given to us that there's been some issue with not having, I guess, fluid communication. I guess I'll use the word fluid between the Office of the State Bank Commissioner and our TEFI folks. And so I would just like to recommend a monthly meeting, whether it's via Zoom or in person, between the OSBC and TEFI staff. Does that work? That way, you know, because you're going to have to be responding to some, what do I want to call that? Significant requests from the Office of the State Banking Commissioner. And also, I think, as we're developing rules and regs and talking about changing the TEFI Act, I think you just need to have, I'm just going to go with fluid, you know, open communication between the two entities.
Okay. Good. Right. Yeah.
Well, we only have one. I say all TEFIs.
All TEFIs, okay. And this will be just a recommendation to both Beneficient and the OSBC on this front. No need for legislation. Do we have a second on that motion? Senator Owens. I'm sorry to give you a promotion there. Senator Owens seconds that motion. Or is there any discussion on the motion? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate this because I think it's targeting one of the concerns that we heard, but I'm also a little worried that we're asking for meetings if things are going well. So it might be appropriate until, I mean, if we put a sunset on it.
What that sunset would be.
Well, and this is just a recommendation to them. So, I mean, there's no enforcement mechanism in here, and I mean, this can be just a recommendation until we meet again, the Oversight Committee next summer when Chair Dietrich chairs it. But there's no enforcement mechanism, there's no teeth, and it's just a recommendation of, hey guys, we recommend you guys meet once a month.
That I understand, and I think at some point the committee may say that's no longer necessary. But at this point, and particularly until regulations are adopted, that might make sense. Thank you.
Did you have something, Senator Fack?
So they have this monthly meeting. Are we talking about BFF issues, or are we talking about TEFI rules and regulations? What would you envision at this meeting?
I would not put guardrails on it, Senator Fagg. I mean, it's whatever they need to talk about.
Yeah. Because I would hope that the TEFI rules and regulations, just kicking ideas would be a great thing in conversation.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further discussions on the recommendation? Seeing none, we did have a motion and a second, so all in favor, aye? Aye. All opposed? Motion passes. Chair Dietrich, for your second.
Thank you, and this is my last one. I want to make a motion that asks the revisers to craft legislation that clearly states that the state of Kansas will not accept receivership if any TEFI becomes insolvent and/or declares bankruptcy. I think we need to protect our state, protect our constituents, and I think that just makes sense.
I agree, and I think that's a wise motion. Do I have a second? Representative Williams seconds that. We're going to open it up for discussion. Any discussion from the committee? Senator Francisco.
What are the alternatives to other entities who could accept receivership?
Senator Owens.
It certainly could be court-appointed trustees, independent third-party trustees. If it were to go into federal court has trustees like they do for bankruptcies and things like that. So there would be plenty of options out there.
That was my only concern because I wouldn't want it just floating.
Okay. Any further questions or comments on the motion? Yes, Senator Fagg.
It gets you thinking about new things all the time here. So when you say receivership, has the state ever taken anything in receivership?
That is a question for research. Looks like it's going to take a bit to figure that out, so we will get that answer.
And I'm kind of questioning what kind of risk we're taking by being a receiver.
I mean, to the banking commissioner's point earlier, there's a New Mexico trust company that's been in receivership
By the state?
By the state for over 7 years now. And all the staff, the time, the money going into unwinding that. So this is just another protection of us making sure that we're protecting Kansas taxpayers on this.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Any further discussion? Seeing none, and we will clarify that this bill will be introduced in both houses as well. All right, seeing no further discussion, all in favor, aye? All opposed? Motion passes. Committee, do we have any further motions, recommendations, or discussions? Representative Hsu.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I can count votes, but I think it's worth having the discussion to have. I make a motion to revoke the TEFI Act.
Okay. You make the motion to introduce legislation revoking the charter or the entire act?
The entire act, get rid of the act. Okay. I think that kind of all of this was kind of stemmed from a poison seed, if you will, and we just kept trying to water and water and water it, and then some of it's working, and I really do want Heston to thrive and have a grocery store, but I think just from its inception, this has smelled a little funny and continues to smell a little funny. And I think, I mean, other than the ones people hear from Heston, like if you try to explain to people like what this is and what the state of Kansas is in with, it is not popular. If you look through any of the comments on any of the various news stories in there, this is not a thing that I don't think Kansans want the state to be involved with. So that's why I'm making the motion.
Okay. Do we have a second on the Hsu motion? Second by Representative Osmond. We'll now open it up for discussion. Senator Owens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While I can certainly admit without question that the way this started and the way that it has gone and where we sit now are certainly not where we intended when we passed this legislation in 2021, I will reiterate that this legislation has done nothing but good for the state of Kansas. We saw on the sheets over $20 million has been invested in the state of Kansas, some of that in Heston, while it hasn't revolved in a grocery store. What about all the other towns that have received seed grants all around the state? Millions and millions of dollars. We heard that just, at our last meeting from the Department of Commerce. What about the potential for the millions and millions more dollars that will come if this company actually is able to be successful and to continue on? I absolutely reject this motion. I understand why you made it to have the discussion, but I reject the idea that right now is the time to repeal the TEFI Act because there is far too much potential with zero risk. I will remind that again. While the taxpayer may not understand it, they also don't understand the school funding formula. They also don't understand Medicaid law. There's a lot of things that the average citizen in Kansas doesn't understand. And for the benefit risk analysis that exists within the TEFI Act, I think unequivocally we've only seen the upside, although it has been a tumultuous journey. And so I will be an ecstatic no on this motion.
Thank you for that, Senator Owens. Senator Fagg.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree with Senator Owens on all his comments. As I listen to testimony, I think the foundation, the city of Heston, has done their job, with where we was at to where they went. I would also say BFF board has done their job as you look at what happened, how did you handle it, where do we go tomorrow? And we live in a complex world today, and I still think the business model to this, we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater on this. And we knew this going in, that there was going to be bumps in the road because it's a new product. But there is a real demand for this type of thing out there, in my opinion, that we need to be able to know how to address and keep working on. And bottom line is there's been no rest to the state. The state hadn't paid a penny on any of this stuff, and look at the good things that's happened. Thank you.
Do I have any further discussion? Are you? Okay, yeah, I was going to add a couple of comments. I'm going to oppose this motion today for one reason. And this doesn't say that we meet in January and February and March and myself and Chair Dietrich aren't satisfied with what's going on with beneficent or the TEFI Act and decide then to introduce a bill, hold a hearing, and repeal it ourselves. Then nothing stops or precludes us from that. But I'm willing today to, and I've made my comments perfectly known about the movement with Mr. Hebner and all that. But I'm willing today to trust Mr. Silk to give him an opportunity to get this right. They've got the bad seed, as Representative Hsu has stated, out. They've got the poison pill out. I'm willing to give them this opportunity to try to make this right, to try to make this work. I think us introducing legislation to repeal the TEFI Act as a whole brings a little bit of uncertainty to their business. And again, that's not to say that we go in February, we go in March, things aren't moving the way we want it to. There's a communication breakdown between OSBC and beneficent, and we say then, yep, finally, we're done with this, and we repeal it ourselves. Then nothing precludes us from that. But I don't want a little bit of uncertainty here getting in the way of Mr. Silk and his team and what they're trying to build here. So that's the only reason why I oppose this motion. But again, it's not saying that we can't, when we meet in session and we're unsatisfied with the direction of this, repeal it ourselves. Because as I've said, we will be taking a look at this this whole thing during session, and depending on the movement we see, it could be at the beginning of session, it could be at the end of session. So that's the one reason I will oppose this today. It's just purely to give them one last opportunity or one last shot. Let's make this work. So those are just my thoughts. Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will just ask, this is probably for research, and you may not have the answer to it today, but if we did revoke the TEFI Act during session, is there any way that then any company or any TEFI can then come and sue the state or have any, actions for repealing that would cost the state money?
We may reach out to, I guess, the revisor's office, but also maybe OSBC to get their thoughts on that at a later date. I don't know any, but I'm not exactly positive. I'm not sure. Yeah. Representative Hsu, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you guys for having this conversation. I think it is worth having, and I think I will push back a little bit on the idea that the state is not at any risk. We might not be at any financial risk or taxpayer risk, sure, but I think there is actually immense reputational risk at stake here. I mean, if you look at any story involving this, it's going to say that we're in business with somebody who's been federally indicted, right? And then what I'm trying to do, or what I would like to do, and I had the earlier motion which did do this, is just try to give us some outs, right? Right now, we have a way to get out of that particular relationship, and then the OSBC, if things go south, has a way now, or the recommendation will be to give them a way out of the charter if things go particularly south. So I appreciate it, and then I close on my motion.
All righty, and the motion again is to recommend and revoking the entire TEFI Act. And do you want this introduced in both houses? Okay, I just want to clarify in case it passes. I want it clarified. All right, so we've heard the motion. All those in favor, aye. Aye. All opposed? No. Motion fails. Committee, do we have any other motions, discussion, thoughts? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. if we could just review the motions that we've made for bills and see if there's any opportunity to combine any of them instead of having them introduced as separate pieces of legislation, because I think there's going to be an overall discussion of the TEFI Act, and I'm not sure that we need a separate bill for something like the statement that the state won't accept receivership. It seems, I'm thinking that might be able to be combined. I'm trying to reduce the number of bills.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Well, let me see if we have any other motions first. If we have other motions, then is there any other motions for recommendations? I see none, so we will now turn it over to staff. Let's kind of review what we got. We'll separate it from just plain recommendations to bill introductions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I'll address the bills that were recommended first, and then Mike can address just the recommendations. So yeah, as of right now, we have motions to introduce two bills. There was the SHU motion that the TEFI Act be amended to allow revocation of the charter if necessary by the Office of State and Bank Commissioner with an appeal process to the LCC. And then the second motion was by Senator Dietrich for legislation that would say that the state of Kansas would not accept receivership if a TEFI becomes insolvent or declares bankruptcy. So as of right now, those are two separate bills.
So, Senator, I'm going to ask actually that those stay separate because there's only two, but I think they deal with two different things.
I agree. I was wondering, I was just trying to make sure I understood.
I appreciate you trying to be efficient.
What was a bill?
I appreciate that. And now we will turn to the recommendation.
All right. In addition to those two bills, we had two recommendations. First one from Senator Owens, recommending the committee encourages the Office of the State Bank Commissioner to earnestly engage with beneficent or obtain any other private or professional assistance necessary to create rules and regulations as it pertains to the TEFI industry in accordance with Section 22 of 2021 HB 2074 to administer the TEFI Act.
Okay. We get that, committee? Okay. Do we have any questions? Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I knew we were going to look at the rules and regulations. I didn't know that they were going to be, I mean, I think beneficent could be a good person to look to, but I don't think we're asking or should ask the Office of Bank Commissioner to work with a particular entity in developing rules and regs. I think they need to seek a wider set of comments.
Senator Owens.
Well, in my motion, actually, I do like the way that it's worded because it includes them and any other professionals or technical advisors, because being that they are the only entity in this, that was the original intention when this legislation was passed, was that the OSBC would work with them and seek outside counsel, and quite honestly was actually provided the funding, which we've already talked about, to seek that outside counsel to administer or come up with those rules and regs for the act. So I like the way that it's worded. The only thing that I would acknowledge is Ms. Ma here said that the TEFI Act lives in Chapter 9 of KSA and Article 23, and so the rule and reg authority granted to the Bank Commission under 9-2322. So I shouldn't reference back to the original legislation passed because it's now statute. So that would be my only.
Okay. And we're committee, we're all fine.
You were very helpful, and I'm just trying to make sure we do it right. Just saying.
In committee, we're fine with that
handwriting.
little minor detail change.
Thank you.
Okay. So we will have that in there. I think that's all we have. Is there?
Mine kind of ties into that one, but this is a touchy-feely one.
We also had a recommendation from Senator Dietrich recommending a monthly meeting between Office of the State Bank Commissioner and all entities chartered under the TEFI Act.
Whether in person or virtually.
Okay. We're all fine with that, committee? Sounds good. All right. Is there anything else for the good of this committee? And they just, yeah. Do I want to know how to get the report out? Just whenever you're done with doctor's appointments. When you're back on your feet, we'll say that. All right, committee, I see no further business. We are adjourned.